Chapter 986. Shui Mang Great Sage was severely injured by Luo Qingwu's Seven Flames Sky-Raising Sword. His true form and indestructible demon soul were both injured, but this also aroused his ferocious nature. Amidst his wild roars, the blood sea that filled the sky suddenly shrank and wrapped around his huge body. His whole body turned into a thin beam of blood light, bypassing Yu Hongyan's body and rushing toward Luo Qingwu, who had injured him. The Seven Flames Sky-Raising Sword just now had almost exhausted the true fire accumulated in the Seven Treasures bamboo fire staff. It had also greatly consumed Luo Qingwu's spiritual power. But facing Shui Mang Great Sage, who was rushing towards her, the purple-robed girl's expression was calm as usual. She summoned her remaining strength and did not continue to control the sword. Instead, she raised her left palm and placed it in front of her, covering her eyes. The next moment, a black light suddenly lit up on her white and smooth forehead. The black light was so pure, crystal clear, like a clean black ice crystal. The ice crystal was condensed with endless divine markings. The black divine light spread out, and everywhere it passed, all was silent. Since ancient times, there had been people who had comprehended the great Tao of heaven and earth. They had come to a conclusion that the end of the universe and the end of heaven and earth was not a grand event, but it was a silent but irreversible return to eternal darkness. There was no light, no heat. Silently, heaven and earth would perish, and all creation would come to an end. At this moment, the black divine light that shot out from Luo Qingwu's forehead was clearly playing out this terrible silent change. It was the divine light of creation that belonged to Luo Qingwu, the solitary divine light. Although because of Luo Qingwu's current cultivation base, the solitary divine light had only just begun to show its extraordinary power, but it had already shown its shocking infinite potential. Shown by the solitary divine light, Shui Mang Great Sage turned into a blood light. Although he did not directly fall into eternal slumber and walk towards nirvana, he was temporarily fixed in mid-air, revealing his whereabouts. The blood mist around him condensed into blood-red ice crystals, then turned into nothingness and disappeared. But with just a slight pause, Yu Hongyan twisted his waist and spun around, unleashing a ferocious mighty thunderbolt spear that struck heavily on Blood Mane Sage's back, causing his body to tremble. His blood mist was disintegrated by Luo Qingwu's solitary divine light, and his back was now covered in blood and flesh. Blood Lap's Great Sage roared madly. Disregarding the heavy injuries on his body, he suddenly flipped over and opened his bloody mouth to bite Yu Hongyan. The back half of his body was pinned down by Yu Hongyan's vanquishing imperial halberd, but the front half of his body suddenly turned into a bloody light, and his body suddenly shrank thousands of times, just like an ordinary wild wolf. However, his speed and power did not decrease, but instead increased. In a flash of light, he had already pounced in front of Yu Hongyan, biting towards her neck. At this moment, Blood Mane Sage was putting his life on the line, tearing his own body apart to give Yu Hongyan a fatal blow. In the nick of time, Yu Hongyan tilted her body slightly to the side and let the Blood Mane Great Sage bite her shoulder. The 7-kill star armor surged with light, and a thick murderous aura turned into purple blades of light, cutting Blood Mane Sage's flesh. But this great demon was also ferocious. He did not yield an inch and did not loosen his bite. The violent power caused the 7-kill star armor to emit a shrill sound. Billowing bloody light blasted towards Yu Hongyan's body through the 7-kill star armor, intending to crush Yu Hongyan to death. Yu Hongyan was expressionless. She could not exert any strength in her right shoulder, which was bitten by Blood Mane Sage. Her right hand was still holding the vanquishing imperial halberd, but her left hand loosened, and then suddenly clenched into a fist. She shouted, and her voice was like spring thunder. Her clenched left hand suddenly swung up. The scene in the void suddenly changed. Strong winds howled, and thick thunderclouds seemed to appear above her head. Thunder rumbled, and lightning flashed in the clouds. Then, a torrential downpour began. The wind and rain intertwined, sweeping the world. Violent thunderbolts, sharp astral winds, fast lightning, and dense torrential rain poured down in an instant, directly smashing the void, turning into earth, water, fire, and wind that went berserk at the same time. Endless power was born and then collapsed. Lin Feng's direct disciple, the Four Guardians Heaven opening scripture, had activated the 8 trigram sky collapsing hammer, the Four Guardians World Annihilation Hammer. Yu Hongyan's left fist smashed down with the power to collapse the sky. Heaven and earth within a radius of thousands of miles trembled, and this punch was about to shatter the void of the universe. The jade-white fist smashed on Blood Mane Sage's head, directly smashing the Wolf Tribe Great Sage's skull into a pulp. Red and white matter exploded everywhere. Ow! Blood Mane Sage's miserable howl was stifled in his mouth. His skull was completely smashed. The shame of being killed by a few Yuanying stage cultivators, and the fear and regret of death mixed together, causing his demon soul, which was already on the verge of shattering, to tremble violently. Summoning the last of his strength, Blood Mane Sage's true form exploded, turning into a mist of blood. Under the control of his demon soul, it formed a sharp blood arrow and directly pierced through Yu Hongyan's shoulder. Even the 7 kill-star armor was pierced, and Yu Hongyan was also sent flying. The blood arrow pierced through Yu Hongyan's shoulder and rushed out from the back of her shoulder blade, shooting into the distance. Blood Mane Sage no longer sought revenge, but only hoped to escape. He had an indestructible demon soul. Although his physical body was destroyed, and his injuries were so serious that he was on the verge of death, if he could be treated in time, there might be a chance to save his life. Even if his strength was greatly reduced, there was still hope. However, several black tornadoes suddenly fell from the Black Sea Immortal Trapping Formation and immediately fixed his remnant soul in place. Although her face was pale, Yu Hongyan pursed her lips and did not make a sound. Completely ignoring her injuries, she switched the Army Vanquisher halberd to her left hand and swung it in a domineering arc, turning around and completely smashing Blood Mane Sage's remnant soul. No! Blood Mane Sage's demon soul let out a miserable howl, but he could only watch helplessly as his soul was destroyed and his bones were destroyed. A demon race great sage who had an indestructible demon soul was killed just like that. As Yu Hongyan's halberd slashed out, her body trembled, and blood spurted out from the wound on her right shoulder, turning into a blazing heat wave that spread out in all directions. For a martial adept like her, a damaged physical body and blood loss was a very serious problem. If not treated in time, it would hurt her foundation. However, at this time, Luo Qingwu had already quickly arrived in front of her. Her right hand formed a sword sign, and the index and middle fingers of her left hand formed a sword. A bright yellow sword light extended from her fingertips. Although it was a 3-foot sword, it did not have the slightest murderous aura. Instead, it was full of vitality. Luo Qingwu waved the bright sword light in her left hand, and the tip of the sword pointed straight at Yu Hongyan's wound, stabbing it. Yu Hongyan closed his eyes and stood still, letting Luo Qingwu's sword light stab him. Moreover, Luo Qingwu's sword light did not cause any more injuries to her. Wherever the bright yellow sword light reached, the wound on Yu Hongyan's right shoulder began to heal rapidly. Her blood vessels, muscles, and bones were all healed, and vigorous vitality was restored. Luo Qingwu's Great Four-Elephant Immortal Slaying Sword, the Earth Origin Living Spirit Sword. This sword nurtured all living beings, and infinite vitality was at the tip of the sword. This sword took the essence of the vast earth and turned it into its own sword will. It then refined the central earth divine light in the living soil into the precious light of the Earth Origin Living Spirit Sword. It could nurture life and catalyze vitality. With the help of Luo Qingwu's Earth Origin Living Spirit Sword, although Yu Hongyan's body was still a little weak, his injuries were no longer a problem. However, at this time, the formation that Li Yuanfang had set up was shaking more and more violently, and it looked like it was about to be torn apart by Great Sage Duanqi. The other blood-eyed black wolves were blocked by Luo Qingwu's Yin's spirit doppelganger, while the 6-horned celestial monkey and the golden rock were also constantly attacking the formation, approaching the entrance of Little Kelowna World. On the other hand, Great Sage Duanqi broke through the obstruction of the Black Nightmare Hurricane and the 9 Heavens Astral Gale, and arrived in front of Yu Hongyan and Luo Qingwu. His huge golden claws were grabbing at their heads. Zhu Yi's Hao-yang doppelganger frowned slightly and turned to look at great sage Duanqi in the formation. At this time, Zhu Yi's heart skipped a beat, and he lifted his head to look in another direction. He saw a few white cloud-like auras descending from the starry sky in the distance, landing at the entrance of Little Kelowna World. A voice was heard, "This aura and power. Could it be Ding of Shenzhou?" At the same time, on the other side, a strong wave of magical power came from the battlefield surrounding the gate of Star Sea. In the starry sky, white clouds suddenly rushed out, as vast as the sea, drowning the universe. Among the white clouds, two figures appeared. One was a white-robed old man with snow-white hair, and the other was a calm middle-aged man. However, the appearance of these two people caused everyone present to raise their eyebrows. The Grand Supreme Elder of Taishu Temple, Shoichi Dashin, and Xianlin Taoist. Shoichi Dashin stretched out his palm, and his fingers opened and closed, grabbing the gate of Star Sea. However, after touching the gate of Star Sea and feeling the energy wave within, Shoichi Dashin frowned slightly. It's not an ownerless gate of Star Sea, it's already under someone's control. This feeling isn't the demonic power of the demon race, but the magical power of a human cultivator? He turned to look at Lin Feng's god of war and Brontosaurus doppelganger, who were fighting with Heavenly Wolf Great Sage and Qiongqi Great Sage. No wonder Xianmen Tianzong's people would appear here. They actually have a gate of Star Sea in their hands. At this time, a roar suddenly sounded between heaven and earth. "Let go!" A huge black shadow rushed out from the side, and a huge claw that covered the sky also grabbed towards the gate of Star Sea. It was a huge black ape with scarlet eyes. It didn't make any moves, but its majestic demonic power seemed to have the power to pierce through the heavens and the earth. It was a heaven-reaching demonic ape in the Dharma-ending realm. The current clan leader of the primordial demonic ape clan, the Great Sage. Shoichi Dashin's eyes narrowed slightly, and his left hand formed a seal, and 6 colorful halos appeared in front of him. The 6 halos were different from each other, and the scenes within them were also different. It was like 6 independent small worlds, and the power of the 6 worlds blessed Shoichi Dashin at the same time, turning into rays of divine light. The 7 heavens of Taishu realm, harmonious 6 divine armor ritual. Shoichi Dashin grabbed the gate of Star Sea with his right hand, and his left palm struck out, colliding with the huge claw of the Great Sage. The void at the point of contact was suddenly squeezed and exploded, and the star projections of the universe of the boundless universe in this Star Sea shattered into pieces, and even the real stars in the boundless universe turned into dust. The Great Sage bared his teeth, and his violent chi and demonic power vibrated together. His body kept expanding, becoming bigger and bigger, and he began to show his true form. Chapter 987. The omnipotent sage revealed his true form, and the powerful force that could tear the heavens and the earth with a wave of his hand caused the sea of stars around him to tremble. Even the Little Kelowna world in the distance shook slightly. Lin Feng looked at the Great Sage and nodded. The heaven-reaching demon ape lives up to its name. As one of the rare heaven-reaching demon apes that could compete with the dragon, elephant, tortoise, and ant races in terms of physical strength, the power that the Great Sage displayed was not inferior to the Kun Dragon King at all. Apart from his physical strength, the violent waves of demonic power from his divine abilities were even vaguely stronger. Even after the monkey revealed his true form, his indestructible defense might be a notch higher, but in terms of pure strength, he still couldn't beat the omnipotent sage unless he used his ever-changing supernatural power to transform into the omnipotent demonic ape. Apart from the time when Jihuang Shenyuan led the extreme spiritual divine monkey to rise and led the primordial demon ape race to dominate Tianhuang, the heaven-reaching demon apes had always been the strongest race among the primordial demon apes. In the Archean epic, and after Jihuang Shenyuan's death, the heaven-reaching demon apes had always been the leader of the primordial demon apes. Not including the monkey that acted alone and did whatever he wanted, the Great Sage was the strongest among the primordial demon apes. Shoichi Dashin looked at the Great Sage with a calm expression. "Yin Yang Elder, Supreme Drum Deity, thank you for your hard work." The void yin-yang bell and the supreme array-breaking drum appeared at the same time. A large amount of black and white air currents circled around one body, while a dazzling golden light flashed around the other body. With a buzz, the void yin-yang bell seemed to be formed by countless folds of the void. At this moment, it expanded continuously, as if a world that had been compressed to the extreme had suddenly returned to its original state. The layers of space and the world in the galaxy kept colliding and pressing against each other, but it did not seem intense. Instead, there was a sense of balance and harmony within it. The black and white yin and yang air currents also turned into rolling clouds, circling around the edge of the space. On the other side, the supreme formation breaking drum transformed into a beam of golden light and rushed into the billowing clouds, adding a layer of golden splendor to the vast world formed by the void yin-yang bell. The golden radiance fused with the constantly expanding folded space, first turning into a foundation, then the ground, then pillars, beams, tiles, doors, and windows. Finally, it condensed into an incomparably majestic golden palace. White auspicious clouds supported the majestic palace formed by the world, which was so huge that it couldn't be any bigger. The chanting of countless immortals and Buddhas came from the palace, as if a holy kingdom had descended into the desolate ancient star sea, and endless light shone on the universe. It was the creation treasure, the Taishu Temple. Ripples of light spread out from the palace, as if they were going to turn the entire star-ocean world into their courtyard. In the blink of an eye, Shoichi Dashin's left hand's seal changed once again. Between his fingers and palm, white clouds swirled and golden light flashed. Amidst the white clouds and golden light, there seemed to be an uncountable number of figures singing together. It was as if he was holding up a mystical world with immortal music lingering in his palm. It was like a holy fairyland, a supreme celestial kingdom that made people yearn for it. The 8 heavens of Taishu realm, Shintianmiao's celestial realm. The Taishu temple had also shed its original shape and completely turned into a creation world. From the outside, it looked like a giant golden egg surrounded by white gas. Within the creation world, thousands of figures flashed, as if thousands of immortals and Buddhas had condensed into their true form. The concept of power was similar to Shintianmiao's celestial realm, but it was different, turning into a boundlessly mysterious pure land of God kingdom. Endless characters of the great Tao appeared and turned into streams of light. Each stream of light was formed by billions of talismans and formations. Shoichi Dashin's Shintianmiao was enhanced by the celestial realm, making its power more profound and grand, blocking the great sage, making it impossible for him to take a step forward. Since the start of the war, the most shocking and destructive collision had begun. Majestic mana and demonic power clashed, causing the entire star ocean to tremble and shake. In the dark starry sky, splendor flowed, and a meteor shower erupted, dazzling, as if stars were falling to the ground. Lin Feng looked at this scene and smiled. Famous people live up to their reputation, they all have their ways. His gaze fell on Shoichi Dashin's left hand, which was holding the star ocean gate, and he could not help but shake his head and laugh. Yet another person who thought that by sealing the star ocean gate he could stop his real body from descending, but he did not know that he could use the void technique of the 2 realms to swap places with his real body at any time. It was just that Lin Feng's real body was cultivating mystic arts, and did not want to be distracted, so he let his avatar and disciples fight with the heavenly wolf great sage and the other demons, and he could also use these demon experts to train his disciples. Of course, this also had to do with the fact that the enchantress, the great sage, and the golden rock great sage had not appeared before. Now, although the great sage had appeared, the cultivators of Taishu Temple had also come, so Lin Feng was not in a hurry to descend with his real body. Instead, he watched the battle between the great sage and Shoichi Dashin with interest. The dragon race, ape race, heaven enchantment, and golden rock all have a gate of the sea of stars in their hands. Including mine, there are already 5 gates of the sea of stars. Could I have guessed wrongly before and you doesn't have a gate of the sea of stars and the last one has always been in the hands of the great void temple? Lin Feng thought about it and shook his head slightly. That shouldn't be the case. I can't feel the magic power of the Star Ocean Gate resonating. While Shoichi Daishin and the Great Sage were fighting, Xianlin Taoist was not idle. His gaze swept across Great Sage Pifowl, Heavenly Wolf Great Sage Zhu Jian, Great Sage Jiongqi, and the Six-Horned Great Sage. He was not in a hurry to make a move. To Taishu Temple, Xianmen Tianzong and the demons were both injured and exhausted, which was what they were most happy to see. However, although Xianlin Taoist did not make a move, just standing there was enough to distract Heavenly Wolf Great Sage and the other great demons. However, Shi Tianhao and the others frowned slightly as they were stared at by his eyes that seemed to be filled with a myriad of emotions but also seemed to be empty. In the current battle situation, Lin Feng's Brontosaurus clone had a slight upper hand against Great Sage Jiongqi's 9 Luminaries sky-shattering formation. The God of War clone was exchanging blows with Heavenly Wolf Great Sage, and it was more or less a draw. The other aspects of the battle were not in Xianmen Tianzong's favor. The Six-Horned Great Sage ignored Shi Tianhao and focused on dealing with Wang Lin's Great Demon clone. It was basically a draw, but the Six-Horned Great Sage had a slight upper hand. Shalom Wondrous Tree was fighting Great Sage Pifowl, and Shi Tianhao and Sangtian Dao Jian were fighting Great Sage Zhu Jian. Xianmen Tianzong's side was at a disadvantage. Although the advantages and disadvantages were gradually becoming obvious, it was not something that could be done in a short time for those who had the advantage to turn it into a victory. Under such circumstances, Xianlin Taoist's existence became conspicuous, and he could become the key to victory at any time. Xianlin Taoist's face was expressionless as he stood calmly in the void, his eyes silently watching Xianmen Tianzong and the others. His eyes flickered slightly as he took advantage of this rare opportunity to observe the magical powers of Xianmen Tianzong and the others. After Lin Feng's God of War clone dodged a round of attacks from Heavenly Wolf Great Sage, he looked at Shoichi Daishin and Xianlin Taoist with a smile and shook his head. Even if he did not come in person, his means were not limited to this. Lin Feng had never liked to pin his hopes on others to win. Open! A spot of light suddenly flashed between the God of War clone's eyebrows and flew out. It then spread out in the starry sky and turned into a huge formation that covered all directions. It was the Yin and Yang life and death formation. It was not a formation formed by Lin Feng's transcendence energy, but the real Yin and Yang life and death formation. It was one of the few powerful formations in the Divine Land. The 6 paths of reincarnation almost directly constructed a whole new world. Boundless radiance kept expanding in all directions. Shoichi Daishin controlled the Taishu Temple and clashed head-on with the Great Sage. Sparks flew everywhere, and the sea of stars turned upside down. The battle was so intense that Shoichi Daishin had to temporarily open the gate of the Sea of Stars. At this moment, the radiance of the Yin and Yang life and death formation rolled over. When Shoichi Daishin saw it, his snow-white long eyebrows twitched slightly. This formation of his can move at will. It is indeed a little tricky. When the Great Sage Zhu Jian, the Great Sage Pifowl, and the Six-Horned Great Sage saw this, their hearts tightened slightly. The Great Sage Heavenly Wolf almost cursed out loud. One was the Jade Capital Mountain, and the other was the Yin and Yang life and death formation. Both could move at will. When Lin Feng showed this formation, he was clearly bullying them because they could not move their own protective formations into the desolate ancient Sea of Stars. That's right. After breaking through Mount Shu, he obtained an even fiercer sword formation. It seems like it can move as well. When they thought of this, whether it was Shoichi Daishin, the Xianlin Taoist, or the great demons, they all frowned. Great Sage Jiongqi stared at the unfolding Yin and Yang life and death formation. His 9-light sky collapsing formation was also one of the few powerful formations that could move at will. In terms of quality, it could compete with the Yin and Yang life and death formation. However, although the 9-light sky collapsing formation was complete and of extraordinary quality, it lacked the core treasure that could suppress the formation. It was not like Lin Feng's Yin and Yang life and death formation, which had 49 Yin and Yang dust as its core. Great Sage Jiongqi's magical power and demon power were not as strong as the Brontosaurus's doppelganger and the doppelganger of the God of War. If he were to fight the Yin and Yang life and death formation, It would be a waste of the 9 light sky collapsing formation. Within the yin and yang life and death formation, a vast mist of light could be vaguely seen. It seemed that there were 49 small light spots that formed a wonderful formation. They flashed together, and in the next moment, it was as vast as the boundless universe, filled with the mysterious concept of creating all living beings. Heaven and earth, life and death, yin and yang, eternity and instant, void and reality, light and darkness, the 6 transformations unfolded at the same time. Endless radiance spread in all directions, turning into an overwhelming barrier that swept toward the great sage Heavenly Wolf. Helpless, the great sage Heavenly Wolf's eyes flickered with purple light. He quickly turned into a dazzling purple light and fled in the direction of the great sage Zhu Jian. The great sage Zhu Jian forced Shi Tianhao and Sangtian Dao Jian to retreat. Looking at the ferocious yin and yang life and death formation, his face became unprecedentedly solemn. He patted the back of his spine, and in a flash of black light, a big bow made of white bones appeared in his hand. A dark red line of blood shot out and fell on the big bow. The great sage Zhu Jian swiped his hand and created a blood arrow. He knocked the arrow on the big white bone bow and aimed it at the yin and yang life and death formation. The great sage Zhu Jian's demon power and aura instantly became much weaker, but the evil qi contained in the bone bow and blood arrow was unprecedentedly soul-stirring and terrifying. Chapter 988. The great sage Zhu Jian let out a deep roar and loosened his grip. The blood arrow turned into a beam of blood-red light and shot out, disappearing in the void in the blink of an eye. The next time it appeared, it had already landed on the yin and yang life and death formation. At the same time, the great sage Heavenly Wolf also exerted his full strength. The blood-red stars around him surged together, and a layer of demonic purple light appeared on the blood-red stars. The purple light illuminated the starry sky, dyeing all the stars in the sky purple. As the light flickered, it flew toward the yin and yang life and death formation. In the purple starry sky, the trajectories and rules of the stars' movements became completely chaotic and untraceable. As the stars changed from orderly to disorderly, it seemed to affect the operation of the yin and yang life and death formation, causing it to slip out of control. At this time, the great sage Zhu Jian's blood arrow arrived. As soon as it touched the huge light curtain formed by the yin and yang life and death formation, it exploded and turned into a huge vortex of demonic power. It kept spinning and stirring the huge formation, as if it was going to swallow the yin and yang life and death formation. The yin and yang life and death formation slowed down slightly, but the powerful formation began to crush the chaotic starry sky and the blood arrow vortex. However, the great sage Zhu Jian and the great sage Heavenly Wolf took this opportunity to flee. As soon as the great sage Heavenly Wolf moved, a tall figure covered in thick dragon scale armor suddenly rushed in front of him and punched his head. "You've gone too far." The great sage Heavenly Wolf was furious, but after glancing at the yin and yang life and death formation, he did not fight back. Instead, he dodged the punch from Lin Feng's God of War clone and continued to flee. Lin Feng said in an indifferent tone, "I'm bullying you. What are you going to do about it?" In addition to his powerful physical strength, his God of War clone's subtle changes in martial arts were also top-notch. When his punch missed, his momentum immediately changed. He spread his fingers and changed his fist into a claw, grabbing at the great sage Heavenly Wolf's face. The Heavenly Wolf great sage was unable to dodge this time. He tilted his head slightly, but his right eye was still scratched by the clone of the God of War. The Heavenly Wolf great sage closed his eyes in time. Although his eyelids were also very thin, as long as he closed his eyes, ordinary nascent divinity cultivators and great demons with undying demon souls might not be able to hurt his eyeballs. However, his opponent was Lin Feng's clone of the divine god of battle. The thumb, ring finger, and little finger of the great sage of Heavenly Wolf were outside his eye sockets, but the index finger and the middle finger were directly inside his eye sockets. The Heavenly Wolf martial sage uttered a cry of agony. His body shuddered violently, knocking the clone of the divine god of battle back. However, the clone was the first to retreat. He bent his index and middle fingers into a hook and grabbed one of the Heavenly Wolf Martial Sage's blood-red eyeballs out. Charge! The Heavenly Wolf Martial Sage glared fiercely at Lin Feng. However, when he saw the yin and yang life and death formation that had been activated again, he did not dare to stay any longer and fled into the distance while howling miserably. The sea of blood on his body surged. The purple and blood-red demonic lights flickered at the same time. These lights merged with the body of the Heavenly Wolf Martial Sage. He suddenly leaped forward and swept up the Zhu Jian Martial Sage, flying into the distance without looking back. After the arrow, the Zhu Jian Martial Sage was almost exhausted. However, he still drew his bow and fired another turbid wave demonic arrow to stop the divine god of battle's pursuit. On the other side, the huge light wave of the yin and yang life and death formation destroyed the chaotic starry sky and the vortex of blood arrows that were blocking its way. Then it expanded again. As the light swept across, the Heavenly Wolf Martial Sage and the Zhu Jian Martial Sage fled in panic. The Heavenly Wolf Martial Sage did not even have time to look after his clansmen at the entrance of the little Kelowna world. As soon as the Heavenly Wolf Martial Sage and the Zhu Jian Martial Sage fled, the united front of the demon race immediately collapsed. What made the situation worse was that Lin Feng's divine god of battle, as well as Shi Tianhao and Song Tiandao Jian, were all freed. The situation of the battle had been completely reversed. Seeing this, Qiongqi and Pifao Martial Sage had no choice but to retreat. If they did not leave immediately, the yin and yang life and death formation would turn to them if they hesitated for even a moment. Pifao Martial Sage suppressed the wondrous Shaluo and took the initiative. He could attack or retreat at will. He quickly forced the wondrous Shaluo to retreat again and flew to the battlefield where Lin Feng's Brontosaurus Martial Sage and Qiongqi Martial Sage were fighting. Magnificent and domineering five-colored lights fell and wiped out the yin and yang four symbols thunderbolts released by the Brontosaurus Martial Sage. Qiongqi Martial Sage also took the opportunity to launch the strongest transformation of the 9 luminaries sky-shattering formation, the 9 luminaries above, and finally cooperated with Pifao Martial Sage from the inside. With Pifao Martial Sage's support, they broke out of the encirclement and fled far away. Finally, they were not intercepted by the yin and yang life and death formation. But the six-horned great sage was miserable. He wanted to escape, but he was entangled by Wang Lin's great devil doppelganger, who was not afraid of paying the price of injury. Moreover, he was the weakest among the demon race, so it was too late for him to escape. He could only watch helplessly as the yin and yang life and death formation devoured him. "Save me, clan leader!" The six-horned great sage screamed miserably and disappeared in the brilliance of the yin and yang life and death formation. The demon force in the formation fluctuated violently, and golden light shone everywhere. But soon, it gradually dimmed. The great sage's pupils shrank slightly. He brazenly pushed back Shoichi Daishin and Taishu Temple, and rushed in the direction of the yin and yang life and death formation. The six-horned divine monkey was not of the same race as him. But as the current clan leader of the primordial demonic ape clan and the common lord of all the demon monkey clans, he naturally had to protect the other ape clans. Just like in the Middle Era, when the clan leader of the Zhuyan demonic ape clan was killed by Mount Shu, other ape clans could ignore it except for the Zhuyan demonic ape clan. But Jihuang Xinyuan fought his way to Mount Shu. Looking at the great sage and the yin and yang life and death formation, Shoichi Daishin did not chase after them. Instead, he reached out again to grab the gate of the sea of stars floating in the void. But Lin Feng's war god doppelganger and Shi Tianhao had arrived in front of the gate of the sea of stars at this moment. The master and disciple were looking at Shoichi Daishin and Taishu Temple with a faint smile. Just the two of them could not stop Shoichi Daishin from taking the gate of the sea of stars. But the war god doppelganger turned around and elbowed the closed gate of the sea of stars again. Shoichi Daishin could only stop in silence. On the other side, Brontosaurus's doppelganger was guarding the side of the yin and yang life and death formation, blocking the attack of the great sage together with the formation. Brontosaurus's doppelganger was sent flying backward. All the lightning in the sky scattered, and the yin and yang life and death formation also shook. But in the end, it was not broken by the great sage. In the yin and yang life and death formation, endless light squeezed together. The majestic force of the reversal of two poles was enough to overturn heaven and earth, causing the six-horned great sage to howl in pain. The remaining sharp horns on his head broke off one by one, turning into rays of golden light dancing in the air. But they were all crushed by the yin and yang life and death formation. The formation was like a terrifying giant millstone, squeezing the six-horned great sage in the middle. First his flesh and blood, then his indestructible demon soul, were all destroyed. Accompanied by a deafening howl, the six-horned great sage, who was in the unity of the stars and soul's realm, was killed by the yin and yang life and death formation. Sensing that the six-horned great sage's demon power and divine sense aura were gradually disappearing, the light in the great sage's scarlet eyes became even more terrifying. Violent and cold killing intent almost filled half of the sea of stars. He looked back at the reopened gate of the sea of stars, then at Lin Feng's Brontosaurus doppelganger, the yin and yang life and death formation, and Shoichi Dashin and Taishu Temple. In the end, he did not continue to fight to the death. He jumped and left the starry sky. But before leaving, the great sage snorted coldly. With a wave of his hand, he directly blew up a star projection and disturbed the flow of spiritual qi in the entire sea of stars. The broken starlight merged with the rampaging spiritual qi in the sea of stars and turned into a terrible torrent, blasting toward the entrance of the Little Kelowna world. At the entrance of the Little Kelowna world, the great sage Duanqi was in big trouble. After breaking through the formation of Li Yuanfang with great difficulty, he saw a tall figure with his back to him had completely opened up a space channel. After the space channel was opened, the tall figure directly turned around and stepped in front of him without saying anything, blocking his attack on Yu Hongyan, Li Yuanfang, and Luo Qingwu. Then he hit them with his palm. 3 enclosures divine palm, heavenly enclosures divine palm. As the palm hit down, endless starlight shone. The power of the Astro Sovereign's martial arts in the Sea of Stars was far greater than that of the outside world. The great sage Duanqi raised his arms and collided head-on with Zhu Yi's Hao-Yang clone. Immediately he was knocked back. Zhu Yi's Hao-Yang clone did not chase after him. Instead, he raised his head and looked up. There were a few white clouds falling down, and there were many figures standing between them. Zhu Yi did not care about the others, but the one in front was a middle-aged man with a peaceful expression. His clothes were made of the void, and the white clouds were his lapels. He was an expert of the Tao integration realm. Although Zhu Yi had never met him before, he could tell that he was a direct disciple of the White Cloud Mountain. The person who came was a member of the Grand Elders of the Taishu Temple, Kai Fengzhou. At this moment, when he looked at the Little Kelowna world, a strange expression appeared on his face. This is actually Ding of Shenzhou? Originally, I was just attracted by the battle here. I never thought that I would get to see this treasure. Although the people behind him had not reached the primordial spirit realm, they were all direct disciples of the Taishu Temple and had seen many things. When they heard Kai Fengzhou mention the name Ding of Shenzhou, they all looked shocked. Kai Fengzhou withdrew his gaze and his eyes fell on Zhu. Zhu Yi looked at him calmly. On the other side, the great sage Duanqi did not know whether to advance or retreat. The entrance to the Little Kelowna world suddenly fell into a strange stalemate. Soon, the yin and yang life and death formation appeared and quickly broke the balance of the battle in the distance. When great sage Duanqi saw that the six-horned great sage was engulfed by the yin and yang life and death formation and that the great sage could not rescue him, he immediately lost all hope and hurriedly led the six-horned divine monkeys under his command to flee into the distance. Seeing that great sage Qiongqi and great sage Peafowl had retreated, the golden-winged giant rocks also flapped their wings and fled. The blood-eyed black wolves had previously besieged Luo Qingwu and Yu Hongyan with great sage Shui Mane, but they still suffered heavy losses. It was extremely difficult for them to escape now. Zhu Yi and Kai Fengzhou frowned at the same time and reached out to stop great sage Duanqi. But at this moment, The great sage unleashed a wild wave that surged to the entrance to the little Kelowna world like a stormy sea. The eyes of Zhu Yi's Hao Yang doppelganger flashed. He no longer cared about dealing with the demon race. His supernatural power retracted and released, sweeping up Yu Hongyan, Li Yuanfang, and Luo Qingwu. Then he rushed straight into the domain passage. Kai Fengzhou did the same, sweeping up the disciples of the Taishu Temple behind him and entering the domain passage together. The terrifying torrent of starlight spiritual qi suddenly rushed into the little Kelowna world, causing the whole world to shake violently. The blood-eyed black wolves, the six-horned divine monkeys, and the golden-winged giant rocks who could not escape in time were also affected and rushed into the little Kelowna world. Under the impact of the torrent, the little Kelowna world shook with a loud bang. The seemingly invisible world began to change. Layers of space began to fold, and an extremely heavy light emerged. The light solidified like the vast and boundless divine land. A giant cauldron gradually revealed its form in the void. Chapter 989. Lin Feng's Brontosaurus doppelganger and God of War doppelganger stood calmly above the radiant world of yin and yang life and death formation, while Shi Tianhao, Wang Lin's great devil doppelganger, Sha Luoxian, and Jian Sungqian stood behind Lin Feng. In the distance, opposite the yin and yang life and death formation stood Shoichi Daishin and Xianlin Taoist. Taishu Temple shrank into a light spot and hid in one of Shoichi Daishin's pupils. Under the premise of not fighting, Shoichi Daishin's primordial spirit could nourish Taishu Temple so that it would not disintegrate. Under the nourishment of Shoichi Daishin's Dharma power, Taishu Temple could be put into another battle until it reached its limit or was damaged. Only then would it be divided into the Void Yin-Yang Bell and the Supreme Formation Breaking Drum. Shoichi Daishin and Xianlin Taoist silently looked at the yin and yang life and death formation in front of them. On the two sides of Xianmen Tianzong and Taishu Temple, on one side was the Gate of the Sea of Stars, and on the other side was Ding of Shenzhou, which had revealed its true form. Silently, the two treasures floated in the Sea of Stars. Lin Feng glanced at Ding of Shenzhou. It was a huge square cauldron with 4 legs. It seemed to be made of bronze, and its body was engraved with fine patterns. Looking carefully, Lin Feng could find Kunlun Mountain, the Yangtze River, the Great Hengduan Mountain Range, the Southern Wasteland Mountains, the vast sea in the east, and the glaciers and snowfields in the north. The vast world of the divine land, the thousands of sceneries, the mountains, and the geography seemed to be found on this bronze cauldron. From this cauldron, one could clearly feel the majestic and heavy feeling of the entire divine land and the human tribe world. The inscriptions and ravines on the cauldron were like the real mountains, rivers, valleys, and plains of the divine land. It was as if there were no mistakes at all. Lin Feng could even vaguely see that the inscriptions on the cauldron were actually changing constantly, corresponding to the geographical environment that was undergoing subtle or drastic changes all the time in the divine land of the real sector. Xia Huang's Ding of Shenzhou is indeed extraordinary. Lin Feng nodded repeatedly. At his current level, his perspective and train of thought were already different from ordinary people. In Lin Feng's opinion, the most valuable treasure among the 9 treasures of the ancient heavenly gates was the divine flame cauldron and not the heavenly jade, which was the strongest in terms of magical powers. By the same logic, among the treasures of creation forged by the previous human emperors, the Grand Emperor's first imperial palace was the strongest in the past. Now, the immortal dragon city that originated from the first emperor was completely built, and it was continuously strengthened with the help of Lin Feng. It was still difficult to say who was the strongest in terms of magical powers among the Dharma treasures of creation refined by the previous human emperors. The king of the underworld's Book of Life and Death also had the potential to improve. However, in Lin Feng's opinion, among the Dharma treasures of creation forged by the previous human emperors, the most valuable Dharma treasure was not the Dharma treasure that was sharp in terms of magical powers, but the seemingly ordinary Ding of Shenzhou. In fact, in the eyes of the Taishu Temple, the great Qin dynasty that controlled the immortal dragon city, the great Zhou dynasty that controlled the Grand Emperor's first imperial palace, and even the king of the underworld who controlled the Book of Life and Death, The value of the Ding of Shenzhou was extremely high. One could not simply look at its power in battles. Shoichi Daishin and Xianlin Taoist were also constantly communicating with each other. "Martial uncle, can we bring forward the plan?" Xianlin Taoist asked via voice transmission. "The current situation in the desolate ancient star sea is also a good opportunity." Shoichi Daishin shook his head slightly. "Xianlin, don't be impatient." Xianlin Taoist fell silent for a moment before saying slowly, "I'm being impatient. The opportunity is good, but we can't control the situation here." At the same time, the master of the celestial sect is still in a situation where he can advance or retreat. The Tenryu Gen won't be lured out of the Xianhai Sea so easily. However, based on the feedback from Infinite Wasteland, the Tenryu Gen's recovery time is likely to be shorter than the 20 years that Martial Uncle Tai predicted. Shoichi Daishin said calmly, "We need an opportunity." Dao Master Xianlin nodded. He glanced at the gate of the Sea of Stars and the Divine Land Cauldron and said in a low voice, "The situation in front of us is really unexpected. The master of the celestial sect actually controls a gate of the Sea of Stars. Ding of Shenzhou, which has disappeared without a trace since ancient times, is actually hiding in the Star Sea and has also appeared at this time." Xianlin Taoist's gaze froze slightly. "No, all of this is not a coincidence. I'm afraid it has something to do with Xianmen Tianzong. The clues that the Celestial Pool sect found back then are real, and these clues fell into the hands of the master of the Celestial sect, which is why this happened today." Shoichi Daishin also looked at Ding of Shenzhou. "This treasure has a far-reaching impact." Lin Feng's Brontosaurus clone stared at the Star Sea Gate, and the God of War clone also looked at Ding of Shenzhou. In the current environment of the Divine Land, Xianmen Tianzong and Taishu Temple were on par. The situation was rather delicate. The final ownership of this creation-grade treasure would have a much greater impact in the long run than in the short run. It was not the only deciding factor, but it was one of the deciding factors. Shoichi Daishin could foresee this, and so could Lin Feng. This was because this magic treasure had a deep impact on the development of the foundation of the sect's younger disciples. This was the first alchemy magic treasure in the history of the Tianyuan Great World. It was even better than the Taishu Temple's Sun-Moon Divine Furnace, the ancient Heaven Gate's Flaming Heavenly Divine Furnace, and other magic treasures. A huge amount of medicinal pills and resources could not create a top expert. Every top expert was created by a combination of various innate talents and postnatal opportunities. Different experiences, and finally, through a path that ordinary people could not replicate, they would step onto a peak that ordinary people could not reach. There were enough bricks and tiles, but there were too many factors affecting whether it would be a magnificent palace or a vast brick kiln. However, it was undeniable that there were enough bricks and tiles. At the very least, it was one of the basic conditions for building a hall. A huge amount of resources could not create a top expert, but it could create a large number of outstanding talents in the middle and lower levels. At the very least, it would greatly expand this level, and it would allow the outstanding talents to develop more smoothly and save more time. The number of outstanding talents in the middle and lower levels would increase. Even if there was no increase in the probability, the number of powerful experts that would eventually emerge would still increase. The Taishu Temple in the past, the Ancient Heaven Gate in the last years of the Ancient Era, and the Primordial Devil Sect, the number one holy land of the Devil Path in the history of the Divine Land, were all like this. When Xia Huang had forged this cauldron, he had considered this aspect. Unfortunately, his ambition was not fulfilled. Ding of Shenzhou had not been refined for long and had only shown its edge for the first time. Xia Huang had mysteriously perished in the war between the two realms, and even Ding of Shenzhou had disappeared. Now that this treasure had finally appeared, Lin Feng and Shoichi Daishin were naturally eyeing it covetously. The same principle applied to the Gate of the Sea of Stars. Controlling a stable passage into the Sea of Stars also meant a huge amount of resources, material resources, starlight baptism, and so on. Lin Feng and Shoichi Daishin faced each other in the void of the Sea of Stars. They did not speak to each other. Their gazes shifted between the gate of the Sea of Stars and Ding of Shenzhou, and finally landed on Ding of Shenzhou. Just now, they had all seen the waves caused by the great sage. They had also seen Zhu Yi and the others enter the little Kelowna world that Ding of Shenzhou had manifested together with the cultivators of the Taishu Temple led by Kai Fengzhou. Now that Ding of Shenzhou had revealed its original form, Zhu Yi and the others had naturally landed inside Ding of Shenzhou. Not only had people entered, but even the raging waves of the Sea of Stars had also surged in through the original domain passage, stirring up a storm in the little Kelowna world. It was also because of this that Ding of Shenzhou had revealed its body. In fact, the interior of Ding of Shenzhou was still quite chaotic at the moment. Zhu Yi's Haoyang clone was protecting his fellow disciples. In front of them, there was a wild flow of starlight. The world seemed to be spinning non-stop, and it was completely impossible to distinguish up from down. Yu Hongyan, Li Yuanfang, Luo Qingwu, and the others were under the protection of Zhu Yi's Haoyang clone. They looked at the chaotic world outside and shook their heads. Fortunately, it only caused the spiritual qi to be chaotic and did not anger Ding of Shenzhou itself. The starlight flow was gradually calming down, but from time to time, there would be a sudden burst of violent waves, which made Zhu Yi's heart tremble. Unless there is the Golden Prometha Bridge, it will not be easy for my main body to come here and face these violent waves directly. Even if I am not in danger, I am afraid that I will not be able to protect my junior brothers and sisters under the shock of the magical power. Fortunately, these violent waves were only rising in a certain area and did not affect the entire inner world of Ding of Shenzhou. Therefore, Zhu Yi's Haoyang clone could still protect Xianmen Tianzong and the others. He moved carefully in the inner world of Ding of Shenzhou, looking for a place where the starlight flow was weak and calm. After staring at the starlight flow for a while, Luo Qingwu seemed to have understood something. This starlight flow is just a catalyst. The key is that it has stirred up the huge amount of spiritual qi in Ding of Shenzhou into chaos. When she thought of this, she opened her palm, and the Zuanshu sword appeared in her hand. As the sword's edge moved, the sword energy became as hot as fire, and the invisible sword intent turned into a tangible furnace in the air. This was the flaming heavenly sword, one of the great 9 heavens divine swords of the ancient heavenly gate. After the Zhangtian Dao Jian submitted to Lin Feng, the ancient heavenly gate's sword Dao technique also belonged to Xianmen Tianzong. When Luo Qingwu observed the Zhangtian Dao Jian, she also dabbled in the great 9 heavens divine sword Dao. Although she did not cultivate it well, it had the effect of comprehending other things by analogy, and she could refer to it to inspire her own sword Dao cultivation. The southern flaming heavenly sword of the great 9 heavens divine swords was the foundation that the ancient heavenly gates elites established after referring to Xia Huang's orthodoxy. As Xia Huang's own people gradually disappeared in the long river of history, his orthodoxy was gradually lost, and it was no longer a system. Only a few scattered techniques were passed down. In the entire history of the Divine Land, Xia Huang was the best in the Water Dao technique, but other than that, Xia Huang was also quite accomplished in the Fire Dao technique. His universal furnace technique used the heaven and earth as the furnace, creation as the technique, and yin and yang as the charcoal to smelt a part of the world and suppress and refine the enemy. It was extremely overbearing. The Heavenly Gate's flaming heavenly sword Dao had the principle of incorporating the essence of the universal furnace technique into it. As Luo Qingwu's sword moved, Zhu Yi immediately understood what she was thinking without any further words. He nodded and guided Luo Qingwu's sword intent into the transcendence energy of Hao Yang's clone. His qi and blood surged, and the concept of power spread out. He immediately felt that he had formed a subtle, almost undetectable, but real connection with Ding of Shenzhou. Hao Yang's clone punched the empty heaven and earth in front of him, and the chaotic flow of spiritual energy actually calmed down a little. Chapter 990. Zhu Yi's Haoyang clone merged the sword intent of Luo Qingwu's heavenly sword of 9 heavens into his fist intent. Vaguely, it resonated with the inner world of Ding of Shenzhou. Wherever the fist intent reached, The turbulent flow of spiritual qi in the void gradually calmed down a little. Zhu Yi thought for a while and said, "I'll open the great cycle of 4 symbols formation. 4th junior sister, 6th junior brother, and little junior sister, help me. We'll stabilize the turbulence in the space around us and have a place to stay in this world first." As he spoke, a spirit turtle the size of a small island, a qilin the size of a mountain, a dragon wrapped in auspicious clouds, and a colorful phoenix shining with brilliance all appeared above the head of Hao Yang's clone. The images of the 4 spirits gathered together. The surging spiritual qi turned into a huge ring, circulating and harmonizing, bearing the profound Tao of heaven and earth. In the ring, the images of the 4 spirits alternated. It was Zhu Yi's great cycle of 4 symbols formation. Although it was performed by Hao Yang's clone and its power was not as great as Zhu Yi's, it was still extraordinary. Zhu Yi's Hao Yang clone stood on the leading dragon's position, while Luo Qingwu landed on the Qilin's position. She continued to activate the sword intent of the heavenly sword of 9 heavens and integrate it into the great cycle of 4 symbols formation. Li Yuanfang stood on the spirit turtle's position, while Yu Hongyan stood on the phoenix's position. They helped Zhu Yi and Luo Qingwu activate the great cycle of 4 symbols formation together. The huge ring formed by the formation expanded and finally stabilized the chaotic spiritual qi in a certain range, making it calm again. However, the ring kept expanding and shrinking, fighting with the turbulence of spiritual qi outside the formation. It could not be completely stabilized. Zhu Yi said, "6th junior martial brother, little junior martial sister, summon your Yin spirit avatars. 2 of your avatars will take the lead. Tiantai and the others will support the formation and stabilize it completely." Li Yuanfang and Luo Qingwu nodded at the same time. The Yin spirit doppelgangers that looked exactly the same as themselves appeared and stood opposite each other at the periphery. The positions they occupied were the heaven and earth positions of the 8 trigrams. Zhu Yi's Hao Yang clone flicked his sleeves, and several figures landed in the magic circle. The 2 youths were dressed in Xianmen Tianzong's standard purple robes. Tai Chi patterns were embroidered on the lapels of their robes, and there was a flying flame symbol on their cuffs. This was the symbol of Xianmen Tianzong's Fentianya's lineage. One of them was a handsome young man with a calm expression and sharp eyes. It was Tang Jun. At this moment his cultivation base had reached the peak of the late golden elixir realm, and he was only 1 step away from the core formation realm. The other young man with a relaxed expression and a hint of unruliness was Lu Xiaofeng. Currently, his cultivation base was at the peak of the middle golden elixir realm. He had encountered a relatively major bottleneck in this realm and had been stuck there for a long time. However, he was only a paper-thin distance away from the late golden elixir realm. Once he broke through the bottleneck, he could immediately pass through the Yin Wind tribulation. Although his cultivation base had been surpassed by Lin Tong and Tang Jun, who had entered the sect later than him, Lu Xiaofeng's eyes were calm, and the cynical smile on the corners of his mouth was still there. His state of mind was not adversely affected. Beside Tang Jun and Lu Xiaofeng stood a young man with a medium build. His expression was calm, and he first bowed towards Zhu, "Master." His clothing was the same as Tang Jun and Lu Xiaofeng. However, the symbol on the cuffs of his robes was different. There were 3 black horizontal lines, which was the same as the Qian trigram. This young man was Zhu Yi's Qian Tian Palace Hall's head disciple, Yang Tai. Beside Yang Tai stood a beautiful woman in purple with a calm and gentle temperament. The symbol on the cuffs of her robes was a pattern that was half black and half white. Unlike the Tai Chi pattern where Yin and Yang blended and black and white coexisted, this pattern that was half black and half white was a straight line from the middle, dividing the circle into 2 equal halves. It was as if a black semicircle and a white semicircle were joined together. This woman and Lu Xiaofeng were both at the peak of the golden elixir middle stage. Similarly, she was only a step away from the late stage of the golden elixir. She was Wang Lin's successor disciple, Li Xingfei. Beside Li Xingfei stood a young man with a rather cold and stern expression between his brows. He wore a purple tight suit with a taiji pattern embroidered on the lapel. The cuffs were decorated with a golden and green semicircular arc that formed a complete circle. He was the only successor disciple of Yang Qing's Nirvana paradise, Zhou Yunzong. Among the various branches of Xianmen Tianzong, Nirvana paradise had the least number of people. Until now, Yang Qing only had one successor disciple. Today, Zhou Yunzong and Tang Jun were both at the peak of the late stage of the golden elixir. They were only one step away from the nascent soul formation stage, but he had stayed here for a longer time than Tang Jun. The special physique of the burning sun body made his strength extraordinary in actual combat. It also had a lot of convenience in the process of ordinary cultivation, but it also made him more difficult than ordinary people. Unlike the cold and murderous Zhou Yunzong, the young man next to him was smiling and curiously looking at the inner world of Ding of Shenzhou, where the spiritual energy was chaotic. He had a long sword in a sheath hanging on his waist. The lapel of his purple robe had the same Tai Chi pattern as the others, and the symbol on his cuffs was a solid black circle. That was the symbol of the light dance pavilion under Luo Qingwu. This smiling young man was the first disciple of Luo Qingwu, Han Yang. Now, he had also reached the late stage of the golden elixir. This time, the 6 of them were brought into the desolate ancient star sea by Lin Feng and his disciple. On the one hand, it was a trial. On the other hand, they were currently at a bottleneck in their own cultivation. If they could gain something from this trial, they would benefit a lot. This was especially true for Tang Jun, Zhou Yunzong, Lu Xiaofeng, and Li Xingfei. If they could gain something from this trial, it was almost guaranteed that they could break through their current realm. After the 6 people saluted Zhu Yi, Yu Hongyan, Li Yuanfang, and Luo Qingwu respectively, they immediately stood in the position of the 8 diagrams according to Zhu Yi's instructions. Together with the Yin spirit doppelgangers of Luo Qingwu and Li Yuanfang, they formed a formation, surrounding Zhu Yi and the other 3 people in the center. The 4 symbols 8 trigrams, one inside and one outside, worked together. Under the control of Zhu Yi's great Yang doppelganger, the surrounding void was completely stabilized, the turbulent flow of spiritual energy was isolated, and a pure land was temporarily opened up in the world inside the divine land cauldron. After the 4 diagrams' great cycle formation was completely stabilized, Zhu Yi nodded. Although the turbulence of spiritual qi is still very chaotic and violent, it will become milder and milder until it completely calms down. He looked at Yang Tai and the others. However, it will take a long time. So, we will stay here to stabilize the formation. You guys can withdraw first. Then, go to the periphery of the formation to explore, expand the stabilized area to the periphery, and open up a path. A magical treasure of creation like Ding of Shenzhou is as vast as the sky. It is not obvious. First, we have to find a way to contact it, and then we can talk about other things. Yang Tai immediately replied, "Master, don't worry. I will be careful." Li Yuanfang said, "Go in different directions to save time. We can't be too scattered. After all, the environment is unknown." Yu Hongyan said, "You and little junior sister's doppelganger can explore in different directions. Tiansong, Tiantai, and the others, don't split up. Go in one direction together." Li Yuanfang and Luo Qingwu nodded together. "Fourth senior sister is right," Zhu Yi said, "although it's to save time, you don't have to be anxious. Activate the formation's power and extend it forward. Just advance steadily. When the spiritual qi in this world has completely stabilized, and we don't need to maintain the formation anymore, we will quickly catch up to you." "Master, what if we meet people from Taishu Temple?" Yang Tai asked after thinking for a while. Zhu Yi said calmly, "Although there is a formation to defend against it, this place is not conducive for communication due to the turbulence of spiritual qi in the outside world. Our divine senses and the turbulence of spiritual qi will not be able to lock onto you. Therefore, you will have to act on your own. If Taishu Temple's Grand Elder Kai Fengzhou of the Tao Integration Realm gets close to the formation, I will be able to sense it immediately. When that happens, I will deal with him. You don't have to worry too much. Under normal circumstances, Kai Fengzhou will protect his group of Taishu Temple's successors so that they will not be separated. Zhu Yi raised his head and looked at the distant world outside the formation. From time to time, there would be extremely violent turbulent tides. However, if he had encountered a similar tide before, there might have been an unknown accident. You guys can just adapt to it. Although he said that, Zhu Yi's expression was calm, without the slightest hint of worry. Yang Tai and the other 5 also wore calm and composed expressions. They all cupped their fists at Zhu Yi in acknowledgement. Then, they bowed to Zhu Yi and Yu Hongyan and left. Then, they turned and walked into the distance. Meanwhile, Luo Qingwu and Li Yuanfang's in-spirit doppelgangers also flew in different directions. Zhu Yi's Hao-Yang doppelganger, Yu Hongyan, Li Yuanfang, and Luo Qingwu's doppelgangers remained where they were, stabilizing the 4 symbols' great heavenly cycle formation. Yang Tai and the other 5 moved forward. Although with the gradual growth of their cultivation, they had been independent even when they went out to train, and it was rare for them to go out in a group like this, the 6 of them still had a very good tacit understanding. Han Yang walked at the forefront. The long sword at his waist had already been unsheathed, and the flaming heaven sword was the same as Luo Qingwu's. It led the formation boundary to extend forward, and gradually opened up a path. Yang Tai and Tang Jun followed closely beside him, one on the left and one on the right, constantly paying attention to the movements in the surroundings. As the formation boundary extended forward, the power of the formation would sometimes become unstable. It was inevitable that a small amount of turbulence of spiritual energy would leak in, instantly forming a terrible storm. Han Yang did not need to be distracted. Yang Tai and Tang Jun would handle it for him. Lu Xiaofeng and Li Xingfei followed closely behind. Zhou Yunsong was the last, and his attention was also on the rear of the team. Han Yang suddenly stopped, sheathed his sword, and looked outside the formation in the distance. The turbulence of spiritual energy there was turbulent, and it was turning into a land of storms. The original world had become chaotic and broken. They could vaguely see that it was originally a valley, but the valley had been broken into a pile of rocks. The soil and rocks were even suspended in the air and kept colliding. In the center of the storm, they could vaguely see a few figures. Tang Jun and the others looked over and saw that those people were dressed in white with white clouds embroidered on their lapels. It was the usual attire of the descendants of the Taishu Temple. These people were trapped in the center of the storm, and the turbulence of spiritual energy kept attacking them. These people were all in the Yuanying and Golden Elixir period. In such an environment, they were in dire straits and could be in danger at any time. Seeing this scene, Tang Jun, Yang Tai, and the others could not help but look at each other. Chapter 991. Tang Jun, Yang Tai, and the others could not help but look at each other as they watched the Taishu Temple's successor in the center of the spiritual qi turbulence, surrounded by perils. Yang Tai pondered and said, they must have encountered the spiritual qi tide that Master mentioned, causing them to be separated from the Tao integration cultivator in the Taishu Temple. The spiritual qi turbulence in the outside world is still very intense, and cultivators below the primordial spirit stage will be in danger if they encounter it. Lu Xiaofeng stared at those figures carefully and could not help but let out a soft cry of surprise. Oh, there are even old acquaintances. The others all looked at him, and Lu Xiaofeng spread his hands. One of them has a cultivation level of the Golden Elixir late stage. The shorter man is called Wan Zhenglun. I met him when I went out to train not long ago. He paused and continued, at that time, everyone had their eyes on a piece of star stone. It was hard to say who was first, so we fought over it based on our own abilities. In the end, I won. There were no old grudges between us. He retreated, and I obtained the star stone, so I did not pursue him. Tang Jun and the others all nodded. If Lu Xiaofeng said he did not pursue him, then he really did not pursue him. Among the second-generation direct disciples, Lu Xiaofeng was one of the top 3 in terms of the art of escape. After he formed his gold core, he cultivated the 8 trigrams of the Great Way of the Heavens. The divine ability he obtained was an art of escape called the Heavenly Meridian Wandering Qi, which was quite mysterious. The other two people were Han Yang, who was currently beside Lu Xiaofeng. He had studied the Shaozi sword of Shu Mountain, the swiftest dark heavenly sword among the ancient heavenly gates' great nine heavens divine sword, and the flying heaven and earth escape technique of the 8 arts of heaven and earth, which were known for their exquisite speed. He had comprehended the Tao of the heavenly virtue scripture and created a heavenly movement sword, which was extremely fast and had sharp attacks. The third person was Irosa, who was not present. His wolf movement technique was also unique, but it was completely suited to Irosa. If others wanted to learn it, it would be more difficult. Yang Tai looked at the 4 disciples of the Taishu temple who were trapped by the turbulence of spiritual qi and said in a deep voice, "We are all from the human clan. Although there is competition in Ding of Shenzhou, we can't just sit back and do nothing since we have seen it. After all, we are not enemies with the Taishu temple." Han Yang smiled. It's hard to say whether the other party thinks so or not. From the perspective of Lin Feng, Xiao Yan, and the others, the situation in the Divine Land had become rather delicate. It had already become an enemy of the Taishu temple, and undercurrents were surging in the dark. But on the surface, in the eyes of ordinary disciples, even if their relationship wasn't very harmonious, they weren't enemies either. Lin Feng and his disciple wouldn't deliberately instill opposing thoughts in their disciples. Everything would take its course. On the Taishu temple's side, although temple head Yan Nanlai, Lord Tai, and other members of the Supreme Elders Guild had already reached a consensus, it would still take a lot of planning for the situation to develop according to their plan. At the moment, it had not been communicated to the younger disciples. So in general, over the years, whether it was Xianmen Tianzong or Taishu Temple, there was still communication between them. It was still a long time before they shed all pretense of cordiality. However, there was no first place in literature and no second place in martial arts. As the 2 peaks of the human clan's cultivation world, the younger disciples of the 2 sects naturally didn't like each other. There were no major conflicts between the disciples of the 2 sects who had come out to gain experience, but there were many small frictions. Tang Jun said calmly, "So what if they treat us as enemies? Just let them come at us." Han Yang smiled carelessly and said, "Yes, so I don't care. You guys can decide. In the face of natural disasters, we'll just lend a hand," Li Xingfei said. "Although there might be competition in the future, we're not afraid of competition." Lu Xiaofeng smiled and said, "Don't look at me. I've already said that there's no enmity between me and that Wan Zhengluan. I wasn't the one who suffered back then. However, it doesn't matter if we help them. The problem is what happens after we help them. If we want to save them, we'll need to borrow the power of the formation and junior brother Han's flaming heavenly sword. When the time comes, they'll be brought into the formation together." As soon as Lu Xiaofeng said this, everyone's eyes flashed. Han Yang said lazily, "They'll most likely continue to move forward with us. If we ask them to follow the path we came from to master and martial uncle, they'll most likely be unwilling. They might even think that we're treating them like criminals." Yang Tai said, "Even if they're willing to go to master's side, we won't be able to rest assured. Master and the others are busy fighting the turbulence outside, so their perception of what's inside the formation is weaker. If anything happens, it might affect the entire formation." Tang Jun said calmly, "We can go in the same direction, but everyone will have to rely on their own abilities." He pointed at the turbulence of spiritual energy outside the formation that had yet to calm down. "As long as we get them out of the center of that particularly violent turbulence storm, it'll be fine. The turbulence outside has yet to subside, but as long as they stay where they are and don't move, at least their lives won't be in danger." After a moment of silence, Li Xingfei asked, "What if they don't want to? We're not on the same side. If they want to be parasites crawling on our bodies and sucking our blood, they're dreaming." Tang Jun said lightly, "Helping them now is just us being nosy. We don't expect them to thank us, nor do we expect anything in return. It'll be fine as long as they're self-aware. If they're not self-aware, then we'll have to help them a little more and throw them out." The conflict between the 2 sides was not sharp, so they wouldn't leave them in the lurch, nor would they take advantage of them. Like Han Yang, Tang Jun didn't care about the possible competition or future troubles. but he wasn't interested in actively supporting the enemy. In Tang Jun's view, it wasn't called having a big picture or being magnanimous. It was unfair and irresponsible to one's own people. Yang Tai said, "If we fight inside the formation, it will also affect the formation. It's better to take them with us. If they do anything unusual, it'll be easier for us to respond." Lu Xiaofeng patted Tang Jun's shoulder and said, "Junior brother Tang, even if something happens, I believe we can handle it." On the other side, Li Xingfei also said, "The contact with other forces isn't all tit for tat. After all, the Taishu Temple is different from the Underworld Hall, the Great Zhou Dynasty, and the Mount Shu Sword Sect. There's no unresolvable conflict between our sect and them." Tang Jun looked at her, Lu Xiaofeng, and Yang Tai, and finally nodded. He was a very assertive person and wouldn't be easily swayed. But unlike his tough style of dealing with outsiders, he was much easier to talk to his fellow disciples. Although he had different ideas, he didn't intend to quarrel with his fellow disciples. He just had to be more vigilant to guard against unexpected situations. Zhou Yunsong remained silent and indifferently stood where he was. He didn't agree or disagree. His thoughts were the same as Han Yang's. He had an indifferent attitude. Yang Tai then looked at Han Yang and said, "I still need you to do it." "No problem." Han Yang smiled and unsheathed the long sword at his waist again. "But this turbulent storm is stronger than before. I can't just use the sword in my hand. I need to use the absolute sword. Everyone, help me keep an eye on it and stabilize the formation at any time." Han Yang's sword was not a very sharp sword. It was a magic sword of the Zhuji realm, and it was obtained not long after he joined Luo Qingwu's sect. Compared to his current cultivation, it obviously couldn't keep up with the situation. Although he was a disciple of Luo Qingwu, his swordsmanship wasn't completely the same as Luo Qingwu's. His talent in the swordsmanship wasn't like Luo Qingwu's, which was why he didn't forge the Xianqie sword as Luo Qingwu's life-bound sword. However, the reason he had been using this magic sword of the Zhuji realm until now and hadn't changed it wasn't because the sword was still suitable, but because there wasn't much difference whether he changed it or not. With a thought from Han Yang, countless tiny runes suddenly appeared on his right arm that was covered by his sleeve, emitting a black light. These runes seemed to have a life of their own. They flowed along Han Yang's arm like a tide toward the magic sword in his right hand. On the back of Han Yang's right hand that was exposed outside his sleeve, a large number of tiny runes flowed past his fingers. In the end, all the runes flowed onto the magic sword in his right hand. The magic sword's blade, chin, hilt, and other parts were completely covered by the large number of black runes. The runes fused and disappeared, and the entire sword shone with a black light. Then, on the black sword's blade and hilt, tiny cracks faintly split open, from which a blood-red light flashed. Wisps of black mist spiraled above the sword, and a tyrannical killing intense soared into the sky. It was an ominous sight. The aura of magic power that leaked from within was shockingly the might and power of a sword of the Yuanying realm. Han Yang's expression was relaxed as he held the black sword in his hand and once again executed the flaming heavenly sword. The sword's momentum was much stronger than before, and it was also much more savage. Relying on the four symbols' great cycle formation laid down by Zhu Yi and the others, Han Yang's sword caused the formation's range to greatly extend forward. At the same time, it also split apart the turbulent storm that surrounded the Taishu Temple cultivators. However, the momentum of his sword was too fierce, causing the flaming heavenly sword's sword intent to become unstable, and its connection with the formation also became shaky. Tang Jun and the others stayed by his side, ready to help at any time to deal with the adverse effects that would arise from the formation breaking. However, Han Yang's control was rather precise. It seemed like he was on the verge of losing control, but in the end he still firmly controlled the sword's momentum and did not let his sword intent break the connection with the four symbols' great cycle formation. The turbulent storm broke apart, and the four Taishu Temple cultivators also entered the four symbols' great cycle formation. Although they were surrounded by danger just now, the four Taishu Temple cultivators still looked very calm, showing their extraordinary confidence and experience. However, when they saw that the people who helped them were Han Yang and the other Xianmen Tianzong disciples, they also felt slightly embarrassed. This was especially so when one of the shorter youths saw Lu Xiaofeng, and his eyes clearly darkened. The four of them were dressed in the Taishu Temple's usual attire, white robes with a white cloud embroidered on their lapels. The one with the highest cultivation base was a young man in the middle stage of yuaning. He looked at the people from Xianmen Tianzong with a somewhat complicated gaze, but he still maintained enough etiquette and cupped his hands at Tang Jun and the others. "I'm Shan Xiang from Taishu Temple. Thank you, fellow cultivators from Xianmen Tianzong." Next to him stood a young girl with a heroic spirit. Her eyes were sharp, and she also thanked Han Yang and the others politely. "I'm Zhao Mingxiu from Taishu Temple. Thank you, fellow cultivators, for your help." As for the other two people, other than the shorter Wan Zhengluan, the other one was a skinny young man with pale skin, an aquiline nose, thin lips, and a cold expression. He also cupped his hands, but his tone was obviously much colder. "I'm Yang Zhao from Taishu Temple. Greetings." Wan Zhengluan looked at Lu Xiaofeng again, and finally, he also cupped his hands. "I'm Wan Zhengluan from Taishu Temple. Greetings." Han Yang looked at Wan Zhengluan and chuckled, then turned to look at Lu Xiaofeng. Lu Xiaofeng naturally understood what he meant, so he smiled and spread his hands. Chapter 992. Among the four people from Taishu Temple, other than Shan Xiang, who was in the middle stage of yuaning, the other three were in the late stage of golden elixir. Although there was a difference between their appearance and actual age, their actual age was not that old. Yang Tai looked at them and asked, "Fellow Taoists, what do you plan to do next?" Shan Xiang and the others observed their surroundings and then looked at Yang Tai and the others. "Are you going to open up a passage and explore into the distance?" Yang Tai nodded calmly. "That's right." Shan Xiang and the others looked at each other, and it was Shan Xiang who said in a low voice, "The direction you are heading in now is the place where we were separated from Elder Kai and the others. We want to meet up with the elders of the sect as soon as possible, and we hope to travel together with you." Hearing this, the gazes of the Xianmen Tianzong people became a little strange. They smiled slightly, which made Shan Xiang and the others puzzled and slightly unhappy. In the past, no matter where they went, they would inevitably take the lead of the group. In particular, Shan Xiang was the only yuaning cultivator among them, but it was not appropriate for him to do so when facing Tang Jun and the other disciples of Xianmen Tianzong. The relationship between the two sides was not harmonious, and Tang Jun and the others did not come here alone. Looking at the four symbols' great cycle formation, one could tell that Tang Jun, Yang Tai, and the others had not been separated from Zhu Yi and the others. Everyone was now under the protection of Zhu Yi, Li Yuanfang, and the others. Unlike the arrogant, sharp Shu Mountain disciples, most of the descendants of Taishu Temple were well-mannered, and their style was much gentler. But in fact, the pride in their hearts was only greater than that of the Shu Mountain disciples. It was just that the external appearance of this pride was rather special, and it was easy to give people the wrong impression. Their pride was not contempt, insolence, or condescension. On the contrary, they were amiable, polite, and patient. It was a sense of superiority that was rooted in the depths of one's heart. Because your level was too far from mine, I could tolerate your ignorance and clumsiness, and would not lower myself to your level. Just like how humans would not be angered by the provocation of ants, nor would they show off their superiority and strength to ants. Since the ancient era, when the successors of the Taishu Temple traveled outside, even when facing the cultivators of the Shu Mountain Sword sect, who were at a similar level, or the Buddhist disciples of the Great Thunderclap Temple, this kind of psychological advantage had always existed. But today, when facing the successor of Xianmen Tianzong, this psychological advantage had gradually collapsed. Not to mention the fight between the higher-ups of both sides, just based on the level of the younger disciples, Taishu Temple had never been able to gain an advantage over Xianmen Tianzong. In the fateful battle between the two stones in the Dragon Arena in West Hill City, the Yuaning Shitiani had been slain by the Golden Elixir period Shitianhao. Before the battle between the two stones, the late Golden Elixir Taishu Temple's direct disciple, by Shiqian, was defeated by the early Golden Elixir period Yu Hongyan, directly crippled. In Xianmen Tianzong's Kunlun Mountain Dharma Assembly, the rising star of the Taishu Temple, Chen Xingyu, a peak expert of the younger generation, had already reached the Golden Elixir period back then. Although Xianmen Tianzong had suppressed him to late Foundation establishment, he was still more powerful than when he was originally at late Foundation establishment. But even with that being the case, Chen Xingyu still lost to the hands of the Xianmen Tianzong's second true disciple, Zhou Yunzong, who was also at late Foundation establishment back then. Absolute Yin was no match for Fenyang. As a matter of fact, there was an example right before their eyes. Wan Zhengluan, a late Golden Elixir cultivator, had just lost to the mid-Golden Elixir cultivator, Lu Xiaofeng, recently, adding to the accomplishments of Xianmen Tianzong's disciples. Even now, although the Taishu Temple's overall strength still stood above the Divine Land, Xianmen Tianzong had gradually surpassed them in terms of the younger generation of disciples. Their title as the greatest sacred land was teetering on the brink of collapse. The various organizations in the Divine Land all had their own sphere of influence. In the surrounding regions, they held an absolute advantage when it came to selecting talents and accepting disciples. Once seedlings with potential appeared, they would be accepted. The various large organizations would often send people out to search for them, preventing pearls from gathering dust. As for the young people who lived in the secular world and wanted to embark on the path of cultivation, they would all yearn towards the large organizations that they had heard about since they were young. But there were exceptions, and that was the three great sacred lands of the past: Taishu Temple, Mount Shu Sword Sect, and Great Thunderclap Monastery. Because their influence covered the entire Divine Land, their selection of talents was also targeted towards the entire human world. Every person who had the heart to embark on the path of cultivation yearned for it, hoping that they could worship under their sect. And among them, Taishu Temple's influence was the greatest, far surpassing that of Mount Shu Sword Sect and Great Thunderclap Monastery. Every young talent that was accepted by Taishu Temple would feel a great honor for themselves and their families. At the same time, because Taishu Temple took the elite route, the threshold was ridiculously high. At that time, they would also verify that the disciples they accepted were all amazing cultivation geniuses. Therefore, in the eyes of many young people, being accepted by Taishu Temple was also a kind of affirmation for themselves. But today, this situation had gradually begun to change. With the accumulation of fame over the years, there were still many young heroes who desired to worship under Taishu Temple. But with the rise of Xianmen Tianzong, and its influence in the Divine Land was growing, more and more people began to turn their attention to Xianmen Tianzong. Many people's first choice was still Taishu Temple, but at the same time, there were also many people whose first choice had become Xianmen Tianzong. In particular, some people who did not have the most outstanding physique could also worship under Xianmen Tianzong to learn Dao techniques. Not only would their future achievements not be low, they might even have higher achievements than worshipping under Taishu Temple. Unlike Mount Shu Sword Sect, which only valued sword talents, and unlike Great Thunderclap Monastery, whose pure cultivation of Buddhist Dharma caused some people to shrink back, Xianmen Tianzong had a serious impact on Taishu Temple in terms of talent attraction, and the impact was becoming more and more intense. Just as the overall influence of both sides was equally divided in the Divine Land, even the attraction of younger talents was now on an equal footing. Therefore, in front of others, the descendants of Taishu Temple could still maintain their pride, but in front of the disciples of Xianmen Tianzong, they could not maintain a psychological advantage. Yang Zhao looked at Tang Jun, Yang Tai, and the others in front of him. His face became even paler, and his gaze became even colder. He opened his mouth and asked faintly, "Forgive me for being presumptuous, my friends from Xianmen Tianzong, who is the leader now?" His gaze swept across the logos on the sleeves of Tang Jun and the others, and finally looked at Tang Jun, Yang Tai, and Lu Xiaofeng. When Yang Tai heard this, his expression did not change, but he frowned slightly. Although Lu Xiaofeng did not say anything, his eyebrows slightly raised. The other party's words really did not have any good intentions. Tang Jun smiled coldly, his gaze swept across Yang Zhao's face, but did not stop. His gaze finally fell on Shan Xiang, and he said faintly, "If the four of you from Taishu Temple wish to travel together, it is not a problem. However, the formation we are in now was set up by the elders of our sect. My friends, please do not use your mana rashly, lest you suffer the backlash of the formation's power." Shan Xiang looked at the surrounding environment and immediately nodded. "Everyone, you can rest assured." Tang Jun grunted, "There's no time to lose, let's continue moving." Yang Zhao looked at him, his ice-cold gaze became deeper, and it made people's hearts palpitate. No one answered his question, but Tang Jun's action just now gave an invisible response. "Who is the leader on our side? There is no need for you to ask, because you are not the leader on your side anyway." Yang Zhao did not say much, and calmly followed behind Shan Xiang with Wan Zhengluan and Zhao Mingxiu, traveling with Xianmen Tianzong and the others. The group was still Han Yang opening the path at the front, but the sword he was using right now had already returned to its original ordinary appearance, a simple foundation establishment stage sword. In the eyes of the people from the Taishu Temple, they couldn't help but cast sidelong glances. After all, it was not a secret in the Divine Land that the disciples of Xianmen Tianzong were well off, and their families were rich. There were people who praised this, but there were also many who thought that this was not conducive to the cultivation of the cultivators themselves, and there was a lot of controversy in the Divine Land. Han Yang's identity as the second-generation successor head disciple of the Light Dance Pavilion was also not a secret in the Divine Land. After all, his cultivation was already at the late stage of the Golden Elixir, but with his current cultivation, the sword he used was only at the foundation establishment stage, so it was inevitable that people would be surprised. Han Yang did not care much about other people's gazes, and instead he was teasing Yang Tai, senior brother Yang. "It is said that people with the same surname were a family 500 years ago, but that Yang Zhao of Taishu Temple is not close to you." Yang Tai smiled. "Maybe it was not very pleasant when we wanted to separate from the family." Li Xingfei said softly, "This person is not simple, his magical power and his mind are very deep." Lu Xiaofeng nodded. "Although we have not actually fought, I feel that he is at least stronger than Wan Zhengluan and more dangerous." Stronger and more dangerous seemed to have the same meaning, but Li Xingfei and the others all knew that in many cases, stronger and more dangerous were not the same. Danger was always something to be vigilant about. If he does not have a primordial spirit magic treasure with him, there is nothing to worry about. Tang Jun said calmly, "Unless he uses the spiritual energy turbulence in Ding of Shenzhou to do something bad." Han Yang said, "I am more interested in that Zhao Mingxiu, fellow Taoist Zhao." Lu Xiaofeng smiled. "Oh, junior brother Han has finally grown up." Han Yang shook his head and said with a smile, "Not at all, I am interested in her because she is a rare sword cultivator in Taishu Temple." As soon as he said this, Tang Jun, Yang Tai, and the others all became interested, and even Zhou Yunsong, who had been silent all this time, turned to look at him. Han Yang nodded, and with another sword strike, he continued to open the way forward. At the same time, he said, "Although she did not use her sword, nor did she release her sword will and magical power, I can faintly feel it." Yang Tai pondered and said, "The swordsmanship of Taishu Temple is derived from their own two great Taoist techniques, the supreme Wang Qing Dao and the void Yin Yang Dao. It is not an independent swordsmanship. It is said that it is also quite exquisite, but it is indeed very rare. I wonder if this fellow Taoist Zhao cultivates the Wang Qing Heavenly Sword or the Great Void Twin Pole Mystic Sword technique." As he said this, Han Yang, Tang Jun, and Zhou Yunsong suddenly changed their expressions. Yang Tai and the others also suddenly looked solemn. They looked up and saw that outside the area of the spell formation, an extremely violent spiritual energy tide was blasting toward where they were. Chapter 993. On the whole, the chaotic spiritual energy turbulence in the inner world of Ding of Shenzhou was gradually calming down. However, in some parts of the world, there were still occasional violent waves that were extremely destructive. At this moment, the waves that were rushing towards the area where Han Yang and the others were located were quite violent. Shan Xiang and the other three looked solemn when they saw it. This wave was much more violent than the spiritual energy turbulence that had trapped them earlier. Even many primordial soul adepts could not withstand it. It was comparable to the wave that had separated them from Kai Fengzhou and the others. Fortunately, Han Yang and the others were now inside the four symbols great cycle formation that Zhu Yi and the others had set up. Zhu Yi and the other three would activate the formation's power to resist the impact of this wave. Han Yang immediately put away his sword. Under such circumstances, he naturally could not continue to expand the path outwards. Otherwise, it would cause the formation to become unstable, and the consequences would be unimaginable. Even so, the formation became violently shaken under the impact of the wave of spiritual energy. The ground that the younger disciples were standing on could not stop shaking. After all, they were in the outer area of the formation, and they were in a newly opened path. It was inevitable that the protection of the formation would be slightly weaker. Cracks appeared in the void in front of them, and the wild spiritual energy rushed in like strong wind blades, bombarding the group. Xianmen Tianzong and the others walked in front, and immediately faced this sudden danger. However, although they were shocked, they did not panic. Yang Tai, who was standing beside Han Yang, took a step forward and blocked in front of Han Yang. Then, with a flip of his palm, a small shield appeared in his palm. The small shield was raised by Yang Tai, and it grew with the wind. In an instant, it turned into a square shield that was 1 meter square. The shield lit up, and at the same time, it extended to the four sides, condensing into 4 flashing white corners, causing the shield to look like an upright square. Then, another layer of light covered the shield, and continued to extend outwards, turning into an even larger square. As the cycle continued, the light continued to expand, making the shield bigger and bigger, protecting Yang Tai and the others behind it. This was a Yuanying stage magic tool bestowed by Zhu to Yang Tai as the first disciple of the Qian Tian Hall. Its defensive power was considered outstanding among the Yuanying stage magic tools. After Yang Tai raised the defensive shield, Tang Jun, who was next to him, immediately pinched his hands together and a white halo appeared. This ring of light was formed from runes that flickered with white light. They turned into a ring that wrapped around everyone present. The runes continued to revolve, and the ring of light also continued to revolve. A perfect and flawless concept of power flowed out from it, forming a powerful defensive effect. This technique was called the defensive realm of the heavenly law. It was a magical technique that most disciples of Xianmen Tianzong practiced, and it was specifically used for defense. Xiao Yan, Zhu Yi, and the others were all extremely talented people. None of them liked to be passive and defensive, but as a teacher, they had to teach in accordance with their aptitude. They couldn't expect every disciple to be exactly the same as them, the master. Especially when the younger disciples traveled outside, it was inevitable that they would encounter unknown dangers. So, for the sake of safety, when Xiao Yan and the others were compiling the basic paths, techniques, and magical techniques of the sect, they had specially created this magical technique for returning to the heavenly law realm. As one of the few defensive techniques within Xianmen Tianzong, this magical technique's defensive power was very trustworthy. Yang Tai's defensive realm of the heavenly law realm came from the same source as this technique. Not only did Tang Jun execute the defensive realm of the heavenly law realm immediately, but the others in Xianmen Tianzong also knew that they were at a critical juncture. So, not only did Lu Xiafeng and Li Xingfei execute the defensive realm together, even Han Yang and Zhou Yunsong did the same. Their styles leaned towards swift and fierce attacks, and they weren't keen on defense. But under Luo Qingwu and Yang Qing's guidance, they also knew the magical technique of returning to the heavenly law realm. 5 white halos appeared at the same time, encircling everyone and the defensive realm of the heavenly law realm. As the talisman characters flashing with white light rotated, they resonated with the power of the defensive realm of the heavenly law realm. On the other hand, the owner of the defensive realm of the heavenly law realm, Yang Tai, didn't execute the magical technique of returning to the heavenly law realm. Instead, he changed his hand seals continuously. A yellow light appeared on his left hand, and an azure water droplet appeared on his right hand. The yellow light contained a strong power concept of the thick earth. It was silent, heavy, and looked ordinary, but it was extremely vast, as if it could bear everything and contain everything. It was the central earth divine light. As for the azure water droplet, although it was floating in midair, anyone could feel its weight. It was as if each droplet weighed tens of thousands of pounds. It was one of the 6 great true waters of the world, the true water of the origin. The 6 great true waters each had their own unique abilities. The true water of the yellow springs could purify everything in the world. The true water of the blood river was the most filthy and filthy in the world. The true water of the first sky could transform everything in the world. The true water of the Xianming was the coldest and coldest, and the true water of the moon was the softest and most yin, which could be used to control water. The unique characteristic of the primordial true water was that it was extremely condensed and extremely heavy. After it was transformed into magical power, it was vigorous, exquisite, and boundless. It surged and gurgled with great momentum. Everyone in the Taishu temple looked at Yang Tai with solemn expressions. Xianmen Tianzong, the first seat of Qian Tian Palace's disciple, Yang Tai, is indeed extraordinary. Over the years, many disciples of Xianmen Tianzong had left the mountain to train, and many of them had already become famous. Yang Zhao was expressionless. His gaze swept across Tang Jun, Han Yang, and Zhou Yunsong. People say that among the second-generation true disciples of Xianmen Tianzong, the 3 strongest people in the same realm are Tang Jun, the first seat of Fenshan Cliff, Han Yang, the first seat of Light Dance Pavilion, and Zhou Yunsong, the first seat of Nirvana Paradise. But now, it seems that this Yang Tai is not someone easy to deal with. He used his magical power to transmit his voice to the other 3 disciples, and Shan Xiang also used his magical power to transmit his voice. The water should be the primordial true water. As for the yellow light, although I don't know the details, it contains the true meaning of thick earth. This person is calm, and his magical power is also inclined towards defense. Although he is passive, in terms of the amount of magical power, I'm afraid that he is above Tang Jun and the other 2. His ability to attack attacks may not be enough, but it is extremely difficult for others to defeat him. There was something that Shan Xiang did not say out loud. If Yang Tai, who cultivated the primordial true water and the central earth divine light, were to compete in terms of the amount of magical power, even he, a middle Yuanying intermediate Taishu temple's direct disciple, would not dare to say that he could win easily. However, Zhao Mingxiu, Yang Zhao, and Wan Zhengluan, who were brought into the desolate ancient star sea by Yuanying, were all outstanding elite disciples who were carefully cultivated by the Taishu temple. Naturally, they had this kind of judgment. This reminded them of some rumors about Yang Tai. As for the outstanding disciples of the younger generation in Xianmen Tianzong, all the major forces in the divine land were very concerned. Compared to Tang Jun, Han Yang, and Zhou Yunsong, who were murderous and incisive, Yang Tai's reputation was slightly weaker, but he had already made a name for himself in the divine continent. Those with similar cultivation realms to Yang Tai's had all expressed that fighting him in the past was a complete torture, and it seemed as if they would never see any hope of victory. Practically all of them were dragged down and tortured to death by Yang Tai. It was slightly better if his opponent was willing to stop, otherwise, the outcome of the battle was usually extremely aggrieved. Yang Zhao was still expressionless, and his eyes were cold. However, Wan Zhengluan's expression was slightly strange. His eyes were wandering as if he was distracted. It was only when his eyes fell on Lu Xiaofeng that Wan Zhengluan's eyes regained focus. Zhao Mingxiu turned to look at Shan Xiang. "Brother Shan, should we help?" Shan Xiang pondered for a while Yang Zhao said silently, "They don't seem to want us to help, so let's see what they can do." Zhao Mingxiu frowned, but the scene in front of her quickly attracted her attention. Yang Tai suddenly put his hands together, and the earth divine light in his left hand and the primordial pure water in his right hand suddenly combined. Seeing this, Zhao Mingxiu, Shan Xiang, and the other 2 people's eyes also shone with a strange light. They watched as the earthy yellow light and the drops of primordial pure water merged, and finally became one, turning into an increasingly powerful and heavy power. This power turned into an ocean-like light, spreading in all directions, but was limited to the area of Tangjun and the other four people's heaven-reversing Dharma realm. The light became more and more dazzling, and all of it was added to the heaven-reversing Dharma shield and heaven-reversing Dharma realm, forming a light ball. Yang Tai cultivated the scripture of Tao of Heaven, comprehending the path, techniques, and mystical arts, central primordial heaven sealing realm. Among the mystical arts created by the second-generation true disciples, it was the strongest defensive technique. The powerful defense made Shan Xiang's eyes narrow, and his heart felt heavy. As disciples of the Taishu Temple, they had their reasons to be proud. Their path was mysterious, and their mystical arts were amazing. Against the heirs of other forces, they would have a great advantage. It was rare for them to meet an opponent of the same level, and it was not impossible for them to kill an enemy of a higher level. However, looking at the huge light ball, Shan Xiang, who was in the middle stage of Yuanying, had no confidence that he could break through its defense. In fact, deep in his heart, Shan Xiang could not help but suspect that even if he were to advance to the late stage of Yuanying and achieve the Dharma of heaven and earth, he might not be able to do anything to his opponent. This discovery made Shan Xiang's heart sink. These are only the second-generation true disciples of Xianmen Tianzong, and their cultivation is only in the golden elixir period. If they are already like this, then Yu Hongyan, who is in the Yuanying period, is even more unimaginable. I'm afraid it will be difficult for me to avenge myself. This was the result of the Taishu Temple's people arriving late. Shan Xiang did not get to see the scene of Yu Hongyan, Luo Qingwu, and Li Yuanfang working together to kill Blood Main Great Sage. Otherwise, he would have felt even more bitter at this moment. Although this violent tide was shocking, it came and went quickly. The power of the four symbols' great cycle formation flowed and quickly filled the gap. Later on, when they encountered similar situations, Yang Tai and his brothers cooperated well, and they were more scared than hurt. In the end, the spiritual energy turbulence outside gradually subsided and no longer posed a threat. The four symbols' great cycle formation that enveloped everyone also gradually withdrew. The group continued forward. Shan Xiang and the others did not part ways, but they still did not communicate much with each other. However, at this moment, another violent spiritual energy turbulence storm suddenly attacked. Yang Tai and the others did not panic and still cooperated well to block it. Although the spiritual energy tide this time was not as fierce as before, it was still not something that ordinary cultivators below the primordial spirit realm could resist. At this moment, without the protection of the four symbols' great cycle formation, Yang Tai and the others also needed to concentrate. Beneath the combined defense of the heaven reversal barrier, the five-layered heaven reversal barrier, and the primordious heavenly sealing barrier, some cracks appeared on the sphere of light. But these cracks were quickly repaired by the flowing light. But new cracks constantly appeared all around. For a moment, the two sides fell into a stalemate, restraining each other. Such a violent spiritual energy storm could not last for long, and it would soon weaken. However, at this moment Wan Zhengluan, who was obviously distracted, took a step forward, seemingly unintentionally. Under the fluctuation of his magic power, he actually touched a crack. Chapter 994. Shan Xiang was thinking about his own matters, so he couldn't help but be distracted by his surroundings and wasn't very sensitive. However, he was still in the middle stage of Yuanying, so he quickly noticed something strange. He looked at Wan Zhengluan in shock. "Brother Wan, what are you doing?" Shan Xiang activated his transcendence energy and restrained Wan Zhengluan. Zhao Mingxiu also looked at Wan Zhengluan in surprise. Yang Zhao's eyes also flashed. Restrained by Shan Xiang's transcendence energy, Wan Zhengluan recovered from his somewhat absent-minded state, but his eyes didn't become clear. Instead, they became sharper and more stubborn. "Brother Shan, since the ancient era, our temple has been the most powerful force in the divine land. We should dominate the world, and all the heavens should obey us. How can we sit back and watch a small Xianmen Tianzong rule over our temple?" Wan Jingluan took a deep breath. His expression was calm, but his eyes were extremely sharp. Right now, Xianmen Tianzong is the biggest obstacle in our temple's rule over China. Pang Jie, Martial Uncle Pang, the person with double pupils, and Senior Sister Bai, our temple has lost more than 1 or 2 disciples under Xianmen Tianzong. Brother Shan, let's not talk about others, but Senior Sister Bai is still suffering in the small world. Hearing this, Shan Xiang's expression didn't change, but his eyes suddenly became deep. Bai Shiqian, who was injured by Yu Hongyan in the past, was his junior sister under the same master, and also his Taoist partner. Today, 10 years had passed in the boundless universe, but for Shan Xiang, the scene of Bai Shiqian returning to Bai Yun Mountain with serious injuries and a damaged soul seemed like just yesterday. During the battle between Yu Hongyan and Bai Shiqian, both sides' martial arts and spells were extremely fierce and violent, and lives were often lost. Neither side showed mercy, or else they would only die. If Xianlin Taoist hadn't arrived in time that day, Bai Shiqian would have died. Even so, she still breathed in more than she breathed out, and almost couldn't be saved. Luckily, the Taishu Temple's foundation was strong enough, and thus Bai Shiqian's life was saved. But from then on, she was always bedridden, unable to get up, let alone recover her cultivation. All these years, Bai Shiqian had been recuperating in a small grotto heaven where time was changing. However, it was not a grotto heaven that sped up time. Instead, it slowed down time so that she would suffer less pain. Dan Xiang and the others who were close to her made the best use of their time to go out and search for a cure. Although he knew that Yu Hongyan and Bai Shiqian had a fair battle, and they both relied on their own abilities, Shan Xiang still felt angry every time he saw Bai Shiqian, who was half dead, and he couldn't control himself. Although he and Bai Shiqian were Taoist partners, and they were disciples taught by the same master, their views were actually not the same. Bai Shiqian was a radical, and his views were more neutral, even more conservative. But because of what happened to Bai Shiqian, he had a bad impression of Xianmen Tianzong. It was just that when Han Yang and the others helped him get out of trouble, it made him feel awkward, and he temporarily suppressed the hostility in his heart. But now, looking at the slightly agitated Wan Zhengluan, Shan Xiang couldn't help but fall silent. His silence naturally loosened the transcendence power that restrained Wan Zhengluan. Wan Zhengluan didn't say anything, and he used his transcendence power, and the billowing clouds attacked Yang Tai and the others, who were resisting the spiritual energy tide. Brother Shan. Senior Brother Wan. Zhao Mingxiu was stunned, and she immediately frowned. If you want to fight with Xianmen Tianzong's disciple, then just fight. Why do you have to do this? Aren't you making a fool out of yourself? Yang Zhao said coldly, Sister Zhao, it's because you're too conservative that anyone dares to bully us now. Among the 4 people present, he and Wan Zhengluan were radicals, while Zhao Mingxiu was a standard conservative. Shan Xiang was conservative when facing other sects, but when facing Xianmen Tianzong, he was also hostile. Yang Zhao looked at Zhao Mingxiu and said expressionlessly, there will definitely be a battle between us and Xianmen Tianzong in the future. Not to mention now, we're all competing for the Ding of Shenzhou. How can we give such an important weapon to Xianmen Tianzong so easily, and let them get even more powerful? There's no need to talk about morality when facing an enemy, just look at the result. Yang Zhao's eyes were cold and his tone was cold. We've protected Shenzhou for so many years, and we didn't do it by being kind to others. It's true that we're the first holy land of the righteous alliance, but that's because of our strength. Outsiders hope that we're honorable and virtuous gentlemen, but that's because a gentleman can be deceived. They can bind our hands and feet, which is beneficial to them. Silently, Yang Zhao said, what outsiders think is their business, but if we take it seriously, it will only make our hands and feet tied, and we won't be able to do anything. Zhao Mingxiu frowned. Senior Brother Yang, forgive me for not agreeing with you. It's true that some of our actions are not honorable, but it's all for the sake of protecting the divine land and the world of the human clan. That's our ultimate goal. Mingxiu is not a pedantic person. For the sake of the big plan, we can't care about some small things most of the time. But at least we should have some basic bottom lines, and we should always do things with a clear conscience. Yang Zhao said indifferently, "Are you saying that Brother Wan and I return kindness with enmity and bury our conscience?" Zhao Mingxiu looked straight into his cold eyes and said seriously, "Whether you have a clear conscience or not, you have to ask yourself. But no matter whether you have a clear conscience or not, your behavior has made others laugh at you. Whether we win or lose, as the successor of our temple, don't you even have the confidence to fight head-on with others?" A slight smile appeared on Yang Zhao's originally expressionless face. He moved his feet and stood between Zhao Mingxiu and Wan Jinglun. He said calmly, "Sister Zhao, on the contrary, whether we win or lose, it's not suitable for us to fight head-on with Xianmen Tianzong, and this has nothing to do with our personal strength and confidence." Zhao Mingxiu was slightly stunned, and her face faintly showed a hint of understanding. Yang Zhao looked at her and nodded. They are all core disciples of Xianmen Tianzong. With Xianmen Tianzong's domineering style, if something happens to them, Xianmen Tianzong will certainly not sit by and do nothing. It's true that I hate Xianmen Tianzong, but I have to admit that this sect has the real ability to threaten our temple. I don't know what the elders think of Xianmen Tianzong. If we kill these disciples of Xianmen Tianzong, it may affect the arrangements of our elders. Yang Zhao's voice was calm, as if he was talking about a trivial matter. But if the disciples of Xianmen Tianzong are really hateful, then what should we do? An accident would be the best outcome. He looked at Yang Tai and the others. "Sister Zhao, you think that Brother Wan is taking advantage of them, but what I think is that although this place has left the formation of the high-level experts of Xianmen Tianzong, will we be discovered?" As he spoke, Yang Zhao suddenly raised his hand and shot out a talisman. This talisman suddenly scattered and turned into streams of light, vaguely enveloping this part of the world. However, these streams of light did not prohibit people from entering or leaving, nor did they have any defensive ability. Their purpose was to isolate and block the perception of the outside cultivators, as well as the communication between the inside and the outside world. Because they only had one purpose, they were extremely powerful in this aspect. Zhao Mingxiu's brows furrowed even tighter. "Senior Brother Yang, you." When Yang Zhao raised his hand, Wan Zhengluan's footsteps paused slightly, but after seeing his movements clearly, he couldn't help but chuckle. He raised his hand and a stream of transcendence energy fell on the light ball that enveloped Yang Tai and the others, creating a small gap. The struggle between the light ball and the spiritual energy storm outside was in a fragile balance. When Wan Zhengluan's transcendence energy was released, the light ball suddenly shook slightly, and the spiritual energy storm also suddenly paused, then became even more violent. Shan Xiang watched this scene in silence. He didn't step forward to help Wan Zhengluan, nor did he stop him. Silently, he just watched from the sidelines. On the other hand, Yang Zhao looked at Zhao Mingxiu and said casually, "To be honest, I'm a little grateful to them for helping us get out of trouble just now. But other than that, I feel more humiliated and embarrassed to be helped by someone I hate. This also makes me hate Xianmen Tianzong even more. I don't deny that my brother Wan's and my behavior is very despicable in the eyes of the general public, even in the eyes of some fellow disciples like you, Sister Zhao. What do you say in the secular world? Tasteless? Despicable?" Yang Zhao's expression was indifferent, and his eyes were cold. "It doesn't matter. Buddhists pay particular attention to laying down the butcher's knife and becoming a Buddha immediately. But in my opinion, cultivation is done according to the heart and the situation. Since I still have obsessions in my heart, I will do as I please. When I get what I want, my obsessions will be resolved, and everything will be clear." He looked at Zhao Mingxiu and said, "Sister Zhao, I know you have your own insistence and ideas, so I don't mind that your point of view is different from mine. If you want to stop Brother Wan, then I will stop you. We'll just have to rely on our own abilities. You can stop me and Brother Wan today, but that's fine. Brother Wan and I will find another opportunity in the future. But I don't think you can get past me." Yang Zhao smiled indifferently. "Sister Zhao, I've always known that you're sharp in fights of magical powers. But at least, you won't be able to get past me in a short period of time. And during this time, Brother Wan will be done." Zhao Mingxiu took a deep breath and turned her head to look at Shan Xiang. Shan Xiang had the highest cultivation among them. If he really made a move, he could quickly subdue Wan Zhengluan and Yang Zhao. But now, Shan Xiang clearly didn't intend to intervene. In a sense, it was equivalent to tacit approval. Seeing this scene, Zhao Mingxiu deeply suspected that if Yu Hongyan was among the people trapped in the spiritual energy storm, Shan Xiang might even join forces with Wan Zhengluan. At this moment, the spiritual energy storm that was affected by Wan Zhengluan suddenly became stronger, while the defense of Yang Tai and the others became unstable. Under this situation, the situation suddenly became dangerous. In the light sphere, Yang Tai, Lu Xiafeng, and Li Xingfei sighed at the same time. Tang Jun, on the other hand, waved his hand at them and said, "The same rice feeds all kinds of people. This is nothing strange." He looked at the flowing light barrier formed by the talisman characters in front of him and smiled coldly. As expected, it's necessary to be vigilant against others. As he said this, Tang Jun temporarily retracted his heaven reversal magic realm. The light sphere became even more unstable and was on the verge of collapsing. However, Tang Jun's eyes suddenly lit up with a green light. Within the green light, a small flame could be faintly seen incessantly flickering in each of his eye sockets. However, these flames weren't bright, but rather a patch of pale white. A milky white pure yang fire lit up on Tang Jun's body. But as this milky white pure yang fire swayed, it gradually changed color and turned into a pale white that was close to gray. At the same time, it shone with a green light. Chapter 995. Tang Jun's body lit up with a pale flame that flickered with a green luster. Wherever the light of the flame shone, time seemed to come to a standstill, giving people a feeling that it was neither hot nor warm. Instead, it was a feeling of desolation and aging. The feeling of time being like water made people's hearts go cold. Kill them, or leave them alive? Han Yang said with a smile, unconcerned. Zhou Yunsong, who was beside him, still did not say anything. However, a faint black light appeared in his eyes, and the sharp killing intent made the hearts of his fellow disciples feel cold. Tang Jun said coldly, "That will depend on how much ability they have." Han Yang smiled. Although he continued to maintain the returning heaven law realm's magical power, he suddenly opened his mouth, and a small black dot flew out from it. This small black dot grew with the wind, and quickly transformed into a huge sword case in midair. It was 8 feet and 1 inch tall, square in shape, and landed in front of everyone. This was one of the 2 Yuanying ritual implements that Han Yang, as the second-generation true disciple of the Light Dance Pavilion, had been bestowed upon him by Luo Qingwu. It was called the Shenyuan Qi sword case. It contained 81 streaks of sharp sword qi that he had been accumulating on a daily basis. It was fierce, and when it was first formed, its power was already extraordinary. As Han Yang refined and accumulated it daily, it would become stronger and stronger as time passed. After Han Yang obtained this sword case, he had never truly used it against an enemy. The sword qis that had been refined and accumulated were already very terrifying. If he released it all at once, the sword qis would cover the sky and the earth, causing the mountains and rivers to change color. Its offensive and destructive power was rare among the ritual implements of the Yuanying. Everyone could feel the fury in Zhou Yunsong's heart. However, he did not make a move at this time. Instead, with a slight thought, his body lit up with a gentle light. Outside of Zhou Yunsong's purple robe, the light condensed, and suddenly there was a robe that was half black and half white. The power of yin and yang intersected, adding to the returning heaven law realm, revealing a powerful and mysterious concept of power. This concept of power revealed the rotation of yin and yang, resisting the aura of all evil. It was not as straightforward and indestructible as the returning heaven law shield, but it was more resilient. As the black and white yin and yang rotated, it diverted the damage from the outside world, using softness to overcome hardness. This was one of the 2 ritual implements of the Yuanying ritual implements that Zhou Yunsong was bestowed by Yang Qing as the second-generation true disciple of the Nirvana Wonderland. It was called the Radiant Robe. Yang Qing had considered that Zhou Yunsong was outstanding in attack but was not good at defense, so she had specially prepared it for him to protect. Yang Qing and Luo Qingwu were still Yuanying practitioners. If they wanted to refine a ritual implement of the Yuanying ritual implement with satisfactory quality and powerful power, it would undoubtedly take a lot of time and energy. It was the same situation for Yu Hongyan and Li Yuanfang. However, Xiao Yan and Zhu Yi were quite experienced in the path of refining, and they had already achieved the primordial spirit. With their help, the ritual implement that Yang Qing and the other three passed on to their own head disciple was not inferior to Tang Jun's pure Yang robe and Yang Tai's returning heaven law shield. Zhou Yunsong activated the radiant robe, and the powerful defensive power immediately filled the gap left by Tang Jun's departure. It was even stronger, and it stabilized the light ball that was on the verge of collapse under the bombardment of the spiritual qi storm. Tang Jun looked at the others and said in a deep voice, "The spiritual qi storm has made the space here extremely chaotic. If we take action later, if the space boundary is chaotic, we may be separated. At that time, we will reunite by following the mana mark." Everyone nodded. Yang Tai supported the returning heaven law shield and the central mixed heaven sealing realm and said, "We have at least 10 breaths time." Tang Jun smiled and said, 10 breaths time is enough." Han Yang also smiled and said, "Then what are we waiting for? Let's go." After saying that, he slapped his palm on the Xinyuan controlling Qi sword case. The lock on the top of the sword case suddenly opened, and a violent sword Qi gushed out like a fierce tiger coming out of the cage. The pale flame around Tang Jun also rolled up and fell on the light ball. Where the pale flame reached, the passage of time seemed to suddenly slow down. The talisman characters flowing on the light ball almost became still at this moment, and the spiritual qi storm outside took the opportunity to rush in. But the moment the violent turbulence of spiritual qi came into contact with the pale flame, it also suddenly became slow, as if it had been frozen. At this moment, the sharp sword qi in Han Yang's Xinyuan controlling qi sword case soared into the sky, dispersing the talisman characters and the turbulence of spiritual qi on the light ball. Shan Xiang, who was outside the light ball, was the first to notice that something was wrong. He looked up in shock. Zhao Mingxiu and Yang Zhao, who were confronting each other, also turned their eyes to the light ball in surprise. They saw the surface of the light ball suddenly tremble violently, and a gap appeared on its own. Then, the violent sword qi and pale flame gushed out. But to the surprise of the people in Taishu Temple, the light ball did not collapse because of the huge gap. It was still functioning normally, firmly blocking the spiritual qi storm in other directions. And the sword qi and flame that rushed out of the gap stirred the spiritual qi storm in this direction even more chaotic. Wan Zhenluan's pupils shrank sharply, because he found that it was not only him who was destroying the balance, but the other party who was destroying it even more. In this situation, the already unstable spiritual qi storm became more and more violent, showing signs of further expansion. Its power and scope were both expanding, and the periphery of the storm kept expanding, trying to swallow him. Shenmen Tianzong's madman. Wan Zhenluan's expression changed slightly, and he was about to retreat, but the pale flame and the turbulence of the storm had already rolled into a ball and affected him. This time, even Shan Xiang's expression changed slightly. It's the talent power of Tang Jun's Emperor's body of blue flame. Tang Jun had traveled the world for a long time, and the power of his Emperor's body of blue flame was no longer a secret. But even so, Shan Xiang and the others did not expect that the pale flame would be so evil. The turbulence of the storm in Ding of Shenzhou caused the spiritual qi in the world to be completely chaotic, and it was very difficult to use it. If it was not for the fact that the supernatural powers were much stronger than the turbulence of the storm, then they could only passively defend, or else the supernatural powers and supernatural powers of a cultivator would most likely be disrupted by the spiritual qi storm. But the pale flame that Tang Jun sent out was actually entangled with the turbulence of the storm, and it did not affect its own function at all. Being touched by the pale flame, Wan Zhenluan suddenly felt that everything around him was changing extremely quickly, and he could not keep up with it. It's not the other things that have become faster, It's me that has become slower. Wan Jingluan was shocked. With this delay, he had already been swept up by the turbulence of the storm. What was even more terrifying was that under the effect of the pale flame, even the sharp sword qi in Han Yang's Xianyuan qi driving sword case was not affected by the turbulence of the spiritual qi in the outside world. It was still sharp, and it slashed towards Wan Jingluan, who seemed to have fallen into a daze. Wan Jingluan's reaction, movement, and perception were all already slowing down. Once he was swept up by the turbulence of the storm, his supernatural powers and spiritual qi became chaotic, and he could not even cast a supernatural power or spell. Fortunately, as the successor of Taishu Temple, he did not lack experience in facing enemies. When he retreated just now, he had already taken out his ritual implement. Being able to enter the desolate ancient sea of stars meant that he was valued by the Taishu Temple, and his protective ritual implement was naturally not bad. Wan Jingluan took out an ink stone, which was also a Yuanying ritual implement. Many thick black ink emerged from the ink stone, and it spread out in front of him. Although the spiritual power was discounted by the turbulence of the spiritual qi, the ink still formed a black cloud, and it blocked the deadly sword qi in front of Wan Jingluan. However, the sword qi in Han Yang's Xianyuan qi driving sword case was extremely sharp. It was only slightly hindered, but it had already begun to cut open the black cloud, which was already not large in size, and it had already begun to slash towards Wan Jingluan, who was unable to fend for himself. Shan Xiang's eyes flashed, and he appeared in front of Wan Jingluan. His hands moved together to form a spell, and he chanted, "The wheel of time returns to normal, and the rules of chaos return to nature, and the rules of chaos obey the will of the heavens. This is the edict." The spell of Taishu Temple, the return of time, erased the abnormal changes of time in this part of the world caused by external forces. Under the effect of the majestic spell, Wan Jingluan, who had been touched by the pale white flame, looked like a clay puppet. Suddenly, his eyes became lively again, and he hurriedly retreated, avoiding the sword qi's attack. But at this moment, a figure had already rushed out from the gap in the light ball, and along with the turbulence of the spiritual qi storm, he instantly appeared in front of Shan Xiang and Wan Jingluan. It was Tang Jun. Tang Jun let out a long roar, and his whole body surged up, and the dark blue and purple flame lit up, instantly turning into a boundless blue sea of fire, as if the whole world was dyed blue and purple. It contained the concept of destruction, and it seemed to be even more brutal and ruthless than the turbulence of the spiritual qi. Shan Xiang's pupils shrank slightly, and he said, "Rumor has it that he is the only disciple under the master of Burning Sky Cliff, Xiao Yan, who has successfully cultivated the nether evil flame. It seems that it is true." The nether evil flame was a demon fire that could destroy heaven and earth. In terms of pure destructive power, it was second to none among the 7 great true fires. At this moment, Tang Jun was surrounded by the blue and purple demon fire, and he looked like a demon king from hell. Behind Tang Jun, a giant beast could be vaguely seen. It had the head of a dragon, the body of an elk, the tail of an ox, the hooves of a horse, and the scales of a fish. It was a qilin. But unlike the qilin formed from Zhu Yi's heavenly qilin technique that was dignified, virtuous, and dignified, the qilin formed from Tang Jun's magic energy was completely enveloped in the netherworld evil radiance, and it emitted a violent, ruthless, and overbearing feeling. The fire qilin seemed to be one with Tang Jun's body, and Tang Jun's body erupted with a blazing qi and blood like a volcano. He threw a punch at Wan Jingluan, and the power of the sky collapsed made even Shan Xiang's heart jump. Tang Jun cultivated the Heaven and Tao Sutra, and after refining a qilin horn that he had obtained by chance, he fused it with the power of the nether evil flame to create a supernatural martial art, the fire qilin's evil fist. The Yuanying stage's ink stone did not have time to protect his body, and if this punch landed on Wan Jingluan, his divine soul and physical body would immediately explode. Wan Jingluan hurriedly used the Taishu Temple's infinite transformation technique, and his body turned between the real and the fake, trying to avoid Tang Jun's punch. Seeing this, Tang Jun laughed coldly, and glanced at Shan Xiang from the corner of his eyes. It's better if he used this move, but it's a waste to use it on you. The pale flames in his eyes lit up again, but this time, it was not on Wan Zhengluan, but on Tang Jun himself. In an instant, Tang Jun's speed suddenly increased. Just as Wan Zhengluan's body was about to merge with the void, Tang Jun had already appeared in front of him. Chapter 996. Tang Jun rushed in front of Wan Zhengluan. Shan Xiang's expression changed slightly. His finger pointing lightly, black and white vortexes appeared one after another, blocking between Tang Jun and Wan Zhengluan. Let's talk, don't be in a hurry to make a move. Shan Xiang said in a deep voice. Tang Jun glanced at him and smiled coldly. You didn't stop him before. Now, you should stay here quietly. If you don't interfere, I'll tell you later. If you interfere, I'll beat you up too. Tang Jun looked at him and smiled coldly. Shan Xiang took a deep breath. Brother Wan just wanted to help you guys, who knew that his good intentions would cause trouble. Everything was just an accident. Tang Jun laughed lightly. Do you believe your own words? Shan Xiang's gaze became deep and serene. The responsibility of the enmity between our two sects isn't something the two of us can bear. Your sect's founder, the head of the Xian Gate, and your master and martial uncles might not be happy to see that scene. Tang Jun said coldly, then you'll have to ask the scum behind you. Shan Xiang's brows furrowed tightly, his heart also becoming angry. I gave you a way out but you don't want to step down, you still want to be so overbearing. Do you think this monastery is Purple Sky Path, Celerita's sword sect? Thinking up to here, the fierceness in his gaze gradually increased, looking coldly at Tang Jun. Good intentions don't get rewarded. Since that's the case, then you guys deal with the spiritual energy storm yourselves. While speaking, the yin-yang path mana of the void exploded out, crashing towards Tang Jun, wanting to knock Tang Jun back into the center of the storm where the light ball was. At the same time, his mana extended out, grabbing Wan Zhengluan who was already wrapped up in the spiritual energy storm, trying to bring him out. Yang Zhao glanced at Zhao Mingxiu and also went up to help. Zhao Mingxiu pursed her lips and finally let out a long sigh, also going up, but not against Tang Jun, but together with Shan Xiang they tried to drag Wan Zhengluan out of the spiritual energy storm. Tang Jun faced Shan Xiang and laughed coldly. Middle Yuaning, Taishu Temple's Middle Yuaning, huh? So what? The mana of Xianmen Tianzong cultivators can't be measured by the standard of the divine land, even if you're Taishu Temple's opponent. With a long roar, the pure yang robe on Tang Jun lit up with milky white flames, protecting him, blocking the streams of light that Yang Zhao used to cast the Supreme Nine Apertures Real God's Treasure technique. At the same time, the Xitigarbha Pure Yang Mirror flew up, fighting against Yang Zhao's short sword-like Yuaning artifact. And Tang Jun's own violent Fire Kylan's evil fist collided head-on with Shan Xiang's yin-yang chaotic hole, blowing up the black and white airflow vortexes one after another. Wan Zhengluan reappeared in Tang Jun's line of sight, grinning. A golden crown condensed from light appeared on his head. The light was as dazzling as the sun, like a small sun floating on top of Tang Jun's head. Rays of true sun-fire divine light that looked like needles fell on Wan Zhengluan's head. Shan Xiang, Yang Zhao, and Wan Zhengluan gasped at the same time, their pupils constricting suddenly. A golden elixir period cultivator has 3 Yuaning artifacts. Is this his own opportunity, or is it a reward from the sect? This is too extravagant. Shan Xiang suddenly put his palms together, a large amount of yin and yang spiritual energy gathered, turning into a waterfall, blocking the true sunfire, and then fell on Tang Jun like a raging dragon. With the help of Shan Xiang and Yang Zhao, Wan Zhengluan was finally able to catch his breath. Although he was swept up by the turbulent spiritual energy storm and couldn't circulate his magic power smoothly, he still controlled the black ink stone and smashed it toward Tang Jun's head. Tang Jun was not afraid. The pale white flame around his body combined with the turbulent spiritual energy storm, and behind him was the magic power of Yang Tai and the others, so he was temporarily not afraid of the disturbance of the turbulent spiritual energy storm, and could use his magic power freely. Facing the joint attack of Shan Xiang, Yang Zhao, And Wan Zhengluan, the flame in Tang Jun's eyes became more and more vigorous, the true fire around his body scattered in the air, all turning into the pale white flame that flashed with green light, turning the surrounding heaven and earth into a gray and stagnant color. Wherever the flame reached, time seemed to stop, but in the next moment, it suddenly flowed again, passing by quickly. Shan Xiang and the others felt an old and desolate air shrouding them, causing their flesh, soul, and magic power to age rapidly, as if they were walking into the twilight years. Shan Xiang and the others each cast a spell to recall time, trying to remove the strange influence of Tang Jun's pale white flame. But under Tang Jun's control, within the area covered by the pale white sea of flames, the flow of time was suddenly fast and suddenly slow, changing unpredictably and difficult to grasp, causing Dan Xiang and the others to be completely overwhelmed. The intense changes that intersected between fast and slow caused the minds of everyone from the Void Temple to be dazed, and they were depressed and uncomfortable to the point of wanting to spit blood. Tang Jun cultivated the Tao Te Ching and combined it with his own power of pale white flame, the divine power of pale yellow overturned. Under the effect of the spell, the attack of Shan Xiang and the others was instantly defeated, falling apart. Tang Jun himself was not in a good state. Under the effect of the spell, the flow of time in his body was also changing fast and slow, but after a long period of hard training, and the pale white flame was his own power, his adaptability was much better than the people of the Taishu Temple. His feet stepped in a chain. Tang Jun was like a qilin surrounded by raging flames, trampling the void, killing his way to the front of Wan Zhengluan. A trace of anger flashed in Shan Xiang's eyes. He shouted angrily, "Quick!" Following his shout, a scroll of painting flew out from his body. The scroll unrolled, and a black and white splash ink painting of mountains and rivers appeared in front of Tang Jun, emitting a huge suction force, trying to suck Tang Jun in. Tang Jun laughed, his arms staggered up and down, like a fire qilin opening its huge mouth, and then his upper and lower teeth bit together, sandwiching the scroll in the middle. The violent Yuanying landscape painting poured down, exerting its power on Shan Xiang's Yuanying immortal treasure, the yin-yang landscape painting. The black and white light on the painting flickered together, resisting the burning of the Yuanying evil flame, and transparent streams of water also gushed out of the painting, transparent and clear like never before, as if it was the purest existence in the world. A faint fragrance wafted out of the water, revealing a mysterious aura of the mother of all creation. This was one of the 6 great true waters of heaven and earth, the true water of heaven. The true water of heaven, under the fusion of the 2 energies of yin and yang, resisted the violent Yuanying evil flame together. Seeing this, Tang Jun nodded slightly. Compared to the rumor that Shushan cultivators are 1 level higher, in Tang Jun's opinion, it was more appropriate to use it on the direct disciples of Taishu Temple. Although it could not be generalized, at least in the case of most people, Taishu cultivators are 1 level higher was not an exaggeration. Not only in the outside world, but also within the celestial sect of wonders. Tang Jun was also regarded as one of the best among the 2nd-generation successor disciples of the celestial sect of wonders. He was one of the 3 strongest cultivators in the same realm. The reason was that he had once successfully recreated the legendary deeds of his master and aunts. At present, the news has not yet spread to the outside world, but all the disciples of the celestial sect of Xianmen already know that not long ago, when Tang Jun went out to gain experience, he once used the late Jedon stage cultivation base, without the help of external forces, relying on his own magical power, crossed a whole realm and single-handedly killed a late Yuanying stage ancestor who had achieved the heaven and earth law phase. And now, the feeling that Shan Xiang gave Tang Jun now was that he was stronger than the late-stage Yuanying patriarch, and the yin-yang landscape illustration refined by Taishu Temple was also stronger than ordinary Yuanying artifacts. But, so what? Tang Jun exerted force in his palms, and the violent power was like the teeth of a fierce demon, and together with the Yuanying evil flame, it was exerted on the yin-yang landscape illustration. No! Shan Xiang cried out and flew over. Countless yin-yang chaotic holes overlapped and covered Tang Jun. But Tang Jun's palms seemed to be lightly rubbing and pressing, and the yin-yang landscape illustration Tianyi True Water exploded. The black and white light were annihilated together, and the terrible power that could tear the sky apart instantly broke out, directly tearing this excellent quality Yuanying artifact into two pieces. In the midst of Shan Xiang's roar, the black and white yin-yang chaotic holes began to shake violently, simulating the power of nirvana of heaven and earth. The entire yin-yang chaotic hole and Tang Jun were blown apart. Tang Jun smiled coldly, "I gave you face, but you don't want it. Then today I will peel off all the skin on your face." He put his palms together and gently patted down, and the void around him surged with countless turbulence. The next moment, four huge beams of light shot up to the sky and surrounded Tang Jun, directly piercing through Shan Xiang's yin-yang chaotic hole. Under Shan Xiang's incredulous gaze, the yin-yang chaotic hole that was pierced seemed to have lost its vitality and began to collapse on its own. It was not actively simulating the nirvana of heaven and earth, but passively dissipating, unable to set off any waves. The four beams of light gathered and squeezed Shan Xiang in the middle. He could only bitterly resist, but could not break out of the encirclement. Tang Jun said calmly, "Have you mastered the yin-yang crushing heaven and earth grind, or the yin-yang infinite void? If not, I have no interest in continuing to waste time on you." These words made Shan Xiang so depressed that he wanted to vomit blood. Yin-yang crushing heaven and earth grind, there were only 4 cultivators below the primordial divinity realm who had mastered this kind of magical power, even among the geniuses of the Taishu Temple. This number even included Bai Shiqian, who had been beaten to a pulp. However, Shan Xiang soon discovered that Tang Jun did not mean to humiliate him. He was just calmly stating an objective fact. Under the pressure of the beams of light, Shan Xiang only felt that his spirit and body were in unbearable pain, and his magic was almost completely crushed. What made him even more depressed was that Tang Jun shook his head, and his attention was no longer on him, but on Wan Jingluan again. In a flash, Tang Jun had already arrived in front of Wan Jingluan. "Damn it, you can't live." Zhao Mingxiu looked at Tang Jun and Wan Jingluan, sighed, and made a sword sign with both hands. "Quick!" 2 sword lights, one red and one green, rose to the sky and met Tang Jun. Zhao Mingxiu looked determined. "I don't agree with what senior brother Wan did, but we are from the same sect, and I can't watch him be killed by an outsider. Fellow cultivator Tang, please forgive me for offending you." As she spoke, suddenly, many sharp sword lights rushed out from the light ball in the center of the storm, intercepting Zhao Mingxiu's 2 sword lights. From the light ball came Han Yang's laughter. "Tang Jun, I'm sorry I took one from you." "As you wish." As Tang Jun spoke, a faint smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. "It's 9 breaths." 9 breaths had passed, and the storm, which had been restrained by his pale flame power and the light ball's defense, had become even more violent and had completely gone out of control. Everyone present, including Zhao Mingxiu, Shan Xiang, Yang Zhao, and the others, were all sucked into the storm. Wan Zhengluan kept struggling, trying to escape from the turbulent storm, but he suddenly saw a fist that looked like a burning volcano filling his vision. With a roar, Wan Zhengluan's head was directly smashed by Tang Jun's fist. Chapter 997. Brother Wan. Seeing that Wan Zhengluan was killed by Tang Jun's fiery Kailan's evil fist, and that even his divine soul was devoured by the ferocious nether evil flame, Shan Xiang and the other 2 glared at Wan Zhengluan. The turbulence in the void became more violent and finally engulfed Tang Jun. The light ball in the center of the turbulence suddenly shattered and turned into specks of flowing light. However, all of this was within the calculations of Tang Jun, Yang Tai, and the others. The turbulence of the spiritual qi became more and more violent, and it was they who personally pushed it, causing the turbulence that should have slowly subsided to erupt. Although it was extremely violent, it was also shorter. The turbulence of the spiritual qi directly broke the void where everyone was, and everyone was sucked into the space gap. They were swept away by the turbulence of the spiritual qi and disappeared. In the distance, 3 white clouds suddenly broke through the void. Their magical power was more powerful and exquisite than Shan Xiang's, but they were also blocked by the chaotic broken void and the turbulence in the void. They could only watch helplessly as Shan Xiang and the others, as well as Xianmen Tianzong and the others, were sucked into the space gap. However, because the void was broken, the turbulence of the spiritual qi had a channel to vent, and the damage to the people in the storm was greatly reduced. Tang Jun, Yang Tai, and the others immediately made up their minds to solve the crisis in front of them when they saw Wan Zhengluan's evil tricks. They took the risk to buy Tang Jun 10 breaths' time, but it was only to let Wan Zhengluan, who deserved it, die. In the void, Zhao Mingxiu called back her 2 sword lights, 1 red and 1 green, to protect her body. However, she was also shaken by the turbulence of the spiritual qi. When she came to her senses, the scenery in front of her had completely changed, and she did not know where she was. It's senior brother Chen and the others. Zhao Mingxiu shook her head and sighed as she thought about the 3 white clouds that had finally arrived after being sucked into the spatial rift. But then she thought of Wan Zhengluan, who was killed by Tang Jun right in front of her eyes. For a moment, she had mixed feelings in her heart. She felt that Wan Zhengluan deserved it, but she was also angry at the unscrupulous overbearingness of the disciples of Xianmen Tianzong. After all, Wan Zhengluan was her fellow disciple. Even if she didn't agree with or even despised Wan Zhengluan's methods, she didn't want to see him die in the hands of an outsider. From Zhao Mingxiu's perspective, she naturally hoped that the elders of the sect would handle this matter. The 3 newcomers are even stronger than that Dan Xiang. It seems that even if there wasn't that sudden turbulent storm, all of you would have made a move later on? A somewhat lazy voice suddenly sounded in Zhao Mingxiu's ears, causing her to be terrified. Zhao Mingxiu turned her head abruptly and saw a young man dressed in purple with a sword case on his back looking at her calmly from afar. It was Han Yang. Han Yang wore a careless smile on his face. Are you actually secretly blaming that Wan Zhengluan in your hearts? He acted blindly without rhyme or reason, and you've all lost your lives. Zhao Mingxiu straightened her expression and stared at Han Yang. I don't agree with senior brother Wan's methods. Regardless of what senior brother Chen and the rest think in the future, regardless of whether or not we will start a fight over Ding of Shenzhou, at least I have no intention of taking the initiative to make an enemy out of you. After all, you have just helped us to escape. Han Yang smiled. If you didn't take the initiative to provoke us, we wouldn't have made things difficult for the disciples of Taishu Temple. Even just now, I actually wasn't interested in fighting the 4 of you. However, I am more interested in your swordsmanship. I feel that it's not just the Grand Void Dual Pole Mystic Sword technique anymore. Zhao Mingxiu heard this and immediately frowned. She squinted her eyes and said, Are you looking down on the Dao techniques and supernatural powers of my Taishu Temple? Han Yang heard this and raised his eyebrows. He said calmly, That's not it. I'm not as omnipotent and powerful as my ancestral master. From the current point of view, leaving the main sect, just based on my personal opinion, the Void Temple is still an unreachable colossus, experts come forth in large numbers, your Void Temple's magical abilities are also mysterious and unfathomable. But the problem is that compared to my ancestral master, I am like a firefly in front of the sun and the moon. But the 4 of you are also no match for the primordial spirit cultivators of your sect. Zhao Mingxiu took a deep breath and made a sword technique with both hands. 2 rays of sword light, 1 red and 1 green, floated in front of her and headed straight for Han Yang. I am grateful that you saved us just now. But this matter involves the honor of the sect. I have been taught by the sect for many years, so I can't just ignore it. Zhao Mingxiu said in a low voice, I don't agree with what senior brother Wan did. He was killed by your fellow disciple. This dispute is not something that I can intervene in. It should be handled by the elders of the sect. You saved me just now. I will repay you generously in the future. But now, I would like to ask for your guidance, Brother Han. Her face was as calm as water. Han Yang, the second-generation successor disciple of the celestial sect 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 of the celestial sect. After seeing Tang Jun's attack just now, Zhao Mingxiu was sure that she was no match for him. But now that she was facing Han Yang, she had to fight. This was for the honor of her Taishu temple. In terms of supernatural powers, the disciples of Xianmen Tianzong cannot be judged by the standard of the divine land, even if the opponent is Taishu temple. Tang Jun's words were still ringing in Zhao Mingxiu's ears, making her feel deeply humiliated and frustrated. What made her heart bleed was that the past battles and the battle just now constantly proved the truth of these words. Tang Jun's words seemed to tear the last layer of the Taishu temple's shameful cloth. He lightly said in their ears, "With the same cultivation level, you can't fight with us." This made Zhao Mingxiu, who grew up learning martial arts in Taishu temple, very depressed. If it were any other time, Zhao Mingxiu might have endured it for a while and returned to the mountain to practice hard so that she could compete with the disciples of Xianmen Tianzong in the future. But after the incident with Wan Zhengluan, Zhao Mingxiu had a strong desire to prove that the disciples of Taishu temple had the strength and confidence to fight head-on. Even if they knew the odds of winning were not big, at least they had enough pride and courage. All the emotions in Zhao Mingxiu's eyes disappeared, becoming focused and sharp like the sword light. She thought of Han Yang, cupped her hands and bowed. "Zhao Mingxiu, disciple of Taishu temple, please enlighten me." Han Yang looked at Zhao Mingxiu from head to toe in surprise. The smile on his lips gradually disappeared, and his eyes became sharp for the first time. "I gave you a helping hand just now, but I don't expect anything in return. You don't have to take it to heart." He still stood there casually, without drawing his sword, but his tone became serious. "Disciple of Xianmen Tianzong, Han Yang, please enlighten me." Zhao Mingxiu made a sign with her hands, and two sword lights, one green and one red, directly broke the void and cut in front of Han Yang. The two Taoist swords were both Yuanying stage celestial devices, and they were in pairs. Taishu temple was born out of the void Yin Yang Dao's great void double mystic sword spell, which always used two swords, one Yin and one Yang, to cut the void and break the void. At the moment, Zhao Mingxiu's cultivation was still at the late golden elixir stage, but Taishu temple gave her two Yuanying stage Taoist swords, which showed how much importance the sect attached to her. She had indeed shown an extremely exquisite cultivation of swordsmanship, and had already mastered the essence of the great void double mystic sword spell. The two sword lights dragged two streams of air, one black and one white, which were separate and mutually reinforcing. The sword will and sword qi completely covered the void, as if they were everywhere. Zhao Mingxiu's red sky sword and green void sword were the best among the Yuanying stage celestial devices of Taishu temple, and they were even more powerful when combined with her swordsmanship. The two sword lights were faintly discernible, and their direction was unpredictable. They appeared in the distance and disappeared in an instant, and the next time they appeared, they were already close to Han Yang's back. Seeing this, Han Yang nodded and said, "Sure enough, you are stronger than that Yang guy and that one guy. Even that Shan guy can't be careless when facing you." Zhao Mingxiu said calmly, "You have a sword, and so do I. Let's fight." Hearing this, Han Yang looked calm and still didn't draw his sword, but his expression became more solemn. "My sword is called the Absolute Sword, which is supported by a Yuanying stage celestial device. It is the truest and most powerful state. But one of my spare Yuanying stage celestial devices was damaged before I entered the Sea of Stars, and it is still being repaired, so I couldn't bring it into the Sea of Stars. So, please forgive me for offending you. I don't mean to humiliate you. On the contrary, although I don't think you can defeat me, you deserve my respect." After saying this, a red light flashed on the fingertip of his left hand, and he pointed at Zhao Mingxiu's two sword lights in the void. Then, thousands of black sword qi mixed with red light rushed out of his fingertip and turned into an inescapable net. This was the first sword technique of Han Yang's Sword of Annihilation, the Annihilation Heavenly Net. This dense net crisscrossed in the void, and no matter which angle the flickering green and red sword lights appeared from, they were blocked by the black sword qi and violently collided with each other. Zhao Mingxiu guided the sword technique. The Great Void Dual Pole Mystic Sword technique was not only wonderful in its changes, but its power was equally fierce. The two swords attacked together and forcibly broke through Han Yang's sword qi net. The relatively feminine green void sword entangled Han Yang's sword qi net, while the relatively masculine red void sword broke through the siege and stabbed straight at Han Yang. However, Zhao Mingxiu was not happy at all. Instead, she was shocked. "I've been tricked." Just as the red void sword broke free from the net, its body paused for a moment and it did not have time to speed up. Han Yang suddenly stretched out his right hand. Zhao Mingxiu's reaction was not slow either. She wanted to control the red void sword to retreat, but it was too late. Han Yang's right hand gently turned and was already holding the red void sword's hilt. A scene that shocked Zhao Mingxiu happened. Small but large black light talisman patterns appeared on Han Yang's right hand like a stream of water. Then, all of them surged onto the surface of the red void sword and continued to spread until the red void sword, including the hilt, was completely covered. The red void sword trembled violently and kept emitting angry cries as if it had emotions. However, it could not stop all of this from happening. It could only watch helplessly as the black light talisman patterns crawled all over the sword like ants. The next moment, all the black light talisman patterns connected and fused together, suddenly solidifying. The red void sword, which was originally shining with flames and had a blade that was like a pool of autumn water, had completely turned into a jet-black longsword. Chapter 998. The surface of the longsword in Han Yang's hand cracked faintly, and the cracks became more and more obvious. A blood-red light flashed from within, like a blood-red river. Under the thick black fog, the sword's edge could not be seen clearly, and only the faint flashes of red light could be seen. Zhao Mingxiu felt that the connection between her and the Scarlet Sky sword had been completely severed, and the sword intent and sword qi contained in the Scarlet Sky sword had also disappeared. All that was left in front of her was a completely different and murderous black sword. Han Yang's expression was calm. He held the long sword that was shining with a black light, and with a slanted slash, he knocked the green void sword that was still in midair away. Zhao Mingxiu caught the dimmed green void sword, bit her lips, and stared at the black longsword in Han Yang's hand. She could feel that Han Yang did not use his full strength, and even suppressed the power of the absolute sword. Otherwise, the green void sword might have been broken in one strike. Not a bad sword. Han Yang looked at the black longsword that was still trembling slightly in his hand. This trembling was not caused by the collision with the green void sword, but the Scarlet Sky sword was still resisting the control of the absolute sword. However, this trembling was getting weaker and soon disappeared. However, Han Yang had removed the restriction on the absolute sword. The black light dissipated and returned to his right hand like a tide. The Scarlet Sky sword saw the light of day again. Before it could cause trouble, Han Yang threw the Scarlet Sky sword back in front of Zhao Mingxiu. Zhao Mingxiu did not take the opportunity to launch another attack. Instead, she put away the Scarlet Sky sword with a complicated expression. "Sorry for the offense." Han Yang cupped his hands at her and said silently, "Fellow Zhao, thank you for letting me win." Zhao Mingxiu closed her eyes and put away the Scarlet Sky sword and the green void sword. After a while, she said bitterly, "My skills are not as good as yours." Fellow Han's cultivation. It was true that the absolute sword was stronger than her Scarlet Sky sword and the green void sword, but Han Yang had grabbed the Scarlet Sky sword with his bare hands. This was enough to show the difference in their cultivation. Han Yang smiled and looked at Zhao Mingxiu with interest. "Fellow Zhao is too humble. However, after fighting with you just now, I am certain of one thing. Your Taishu Temple swordsmanship has indeed incorporated some of the mysteries of the immortal sword qi of Shushan. Years ago, after my ancestor defeated the Shushan sword sect and sealed the mountain, your sect's grand elder, Lord Yuan, went to Shushan. Although he only stayed for a short while before leaving, looking back now, he did gain something. Zhao Mingxiu calmly nodded her head and did not deny it. Even though the Void Temple did not proactively publicize this matter, it was not something that had to be kept a secret. She did not mind the outside world knowing about it. Han Yang smiled and shook his head. The Taishu Dao is indeed extraordinary. Shu Mountain's one sword gave birth to tens of thousands of swords. They concealed the truth and spread their sword intent across the world to nourish their own immortal heaven sword. Sword sects that carried the sword intent of Shu Mountain were innately castrated from reaching the top. No matter how many geniuses they produced, it was all in vain. At a certain height, the harder they tried to break through, the more they contributed to the immortal heaven sword unless they destroyed their own foundation and started from scratch. The Taishu Temple, on the other hand, incorporated the heavenly immortal sword Qi into their own cultivation system. Before the birth of the heavenly virtue scripture, the great way of Taishu was indeed the best scripture in the divine land. There was no need for him to integrate everything. He just had to choose what he needed from it and bring his sword Dao to the next level. Although Han Yang was still in the golden elixir period, he already had some insight in swordsmanship. Naturally, he could see that Zhao Mingxiu was limited by her cultivation. She only had a superficial understanding of the swordsmanship of Taishu Temple. Taishu Temple must have experts with a higher understanding of swordsmanship. Zhao Mingxiu looked at Han Yang's right hand. Did you use a Dharma ability, or is it because your sword doesn't have a real form? Han Yang's gaze became calm again. The arrogance and sharpness disappeared, and a lazy smile appeared on his face. My sword, the absolute sword, doesn't have a real form usually. However, as long as I come into contact with something, it can turn into the form of the absolute sword. Actually, anything will do, regardless of size or shape. However, I'm ashamed to say that I haven't reached the state where I can turn all things into swords. Therefore, it's best to have something that looks like a sword as a form. The spirit Qi storm in the inner world of Ding of Shenzhou gradually calmed down. The scenery returned to normal. Mountains, rivers, grass, and trees reappeared. Han Yang reached out his hand. A tree branch broke off from a distant tree and flew over to his right hand. An ordinary tree branch could be broken by an ordinary person's hands. However, a black light flashed on Han Yang's right hand. Dense black runes spread to the surface of the tree branch and wrapped it up. The next moment, the tree branch's shape didn't change. However, the surface of the tree flickered with black light. Tiny cracks appeared on the tree branch, and a ferocious bloody light flowed through the cracks. A shocking murderous aura surged and shattered the surrounding void. An ordinary and fragile tree branch turned into an extremely powerful Yuaning period magic weapon in Han Yang's hand. However, Zhao Mingxiu could feel that the absolute sword in Han Yang's hand was terrifying. However, it couldn't be compared to when it corroded the Scarlet Sky Sword. Han Yang turned the Scarlet Sky Sword into the Absolute Sword. Its power was almost the combination of the Absolute Sword, and the Scarlet Sky Sword. Although Zhao Mingxiu couldn't feel the existence of the Scarlet Sky Sword, the powerful waves of power were obviously much stronger than before. The Absolute Sword, which used the Scarlet Sky Sword as its body, could be said to have surpassed almost all Yuaning period magic weapons in terms of pure lethality and destructive power. It had surpassed the limits of Yuaning period magic weapons. No wonder you said that by using a Yuaning period sword as a body, your ominous sword is in its true and strongest state, Zhao Mingxiu muttered to herself. She stared at the tree branch in Han Yang's hand that had completely changed. Suddenly she asked, "This sword of yours was refined using Hua Luo's body as the raw material?" Upon hearing this, Han Yang dispersed the sword light of the Absolute Sword, and the tree branch in his hand returned to its original state. He gently threw it aside, looked at Zhao Mingxiu, and said with a smile, "The direct disciple of the Taishu realm is indeed experienced and knowledgeable. Not bad, I killed a Demon King realm body-seizing demon." Hua Luo was an extremely rare demon race, also known as a body-seizing demon. When it was born, it had a fixed body, but as it grew older, its body would lose its fixed shape, and its appearance would become like a gray shadow. Its innate magical ability was to attach itself to other demons, or even humans, and control their bodies. It was not soul-seizing, but body-eroding. Hua Luo, who had attained the indestructible demon soul realm, could not only erode tangible objects, but also the primordial spirit and indestructible demon soul. After possession, Hua Luo could not activate the magical abilities of the possessed, nor could he read the memories or thoughts of the possessed. However, he could control the movement of the possessed body, and could use the demonic energy or spiritual energy to perform other magical abilities of Hua Luo's own. The success of the possession depended on the strength of the two parties. However, generally speaking, as long as the other party's strength was slightly lower than Hua Luo's, there was a high chance that the possession would succeed. In the vast land of infinite wilderness, the Hua Luo had caused quite a stir because of this powerful magical ability. However, it was also because of this magical ability that, like the Blood River sect and the Tao of puppets of the human race, Hua Luo was rather hated. In the entire heaven primordial world, he was constantly hunted down. Thus, until now, Hua Luo was almost extinct, and it was rare to see one. For example, the Hua Ho that Han Yang had killed had reached the Demon King realm, which was even rarer than the feathers of a phoenix and the horns of a qilin. Han Yang's ominous sword used the remains of this Hua Luo king's body, demonic soul, and demonic infant, as well as the invisible divine metal as the main material. Luo Qingwu had asked Xiao Yan to help with the refinement, and had also obtained some Qiongqi essence blood from Shi Tianhao. She had refined it together with the Blood River True Water. The Qiongqi clan's magical ability was to form a torrential black sewage. Its effects were similar to the Blood River True Water, and it could pollute the opponent's dermic powers and even seize control of the opponent's magical abilities and treasures. With the fusion of various materials, Luo Qingwu and Han Yang had even tried to incorporate a trace of the heaven-punishing sword Qi's unparalleled ferocious sword will. They had almost destroyed all the materials, and in the end, they had only managed to complete this sword after much danger. Even though Han Yang had only used a tree branch as a vessel, the ominous sword was a top-notch existence among the Yuanying realm Dharma weapons, surpassing Zhao Mingxiu's Scarlet Sky and Green Void swords. When he had used the Scarlet Sky sword as a vessel, it had become even more ferocious and domineering. Han Yang suddenly asked with interest, "When the three white clouds appeared, you mentioned Senior Martial Brother Qin. Were you referring to Qin Xingyu?" Without waiting for Zhao Mingxiu to answer, he smiled and said leisurely, "Tisk tisk, now I really feel that the guy with the surname 1 is very annoying. It would be great if he could wait for Qin Xingyu and the other two." Zhao Mingxiu opened her mouth, and for a moment, she didn't know how to reply. She wanted to scold Han Yang for being so arrogant, but when she thought about the fight just now, she actually felt a vague sense of trust in him, which made her feel extremely conflicted. As they were talking, the two of them felt a tremor under their feet. The inner world of Ding of Shenzhou was slightly turbulent again, and the earth shook and the mountains shook. What's going on? Han Yang and Zhao Mingxiu were both shocked. At this moment, outside Ding of Shenzhou, Lin Feng's Brontosaurus doppelganger stretched out a claw, while Shoichi Dashin stretched out a hand and grabbed the edge of Ding of Shenzhou at the same time. The yin and yang life and death formation was above the doppelganger of the god of war, standing next to the Brontosaurus doppelganger, looking at Shoichi Dashin with his hands behind his back. Shi Tianhao and Wang Lin's great devil doppelganger were also standing behind Lin Feng, and Xianlin Taoist was also standing next to Shoichi Dashin. The two sides were on the verge of a fight. Lin Feng's doppelganger of the god of war tilted his head slightly. Shi Tianhao nodded and immediately jumped into Ding of Shenzhou. Shoichi Dashin and Xianlin Taoist's eyes flashed at the same time, and the Dharma power of Taishu Temple also leaked out. Lin Feng's Brontosaurus doppelganger and the doppelganger of the god of war stared at them expressionlessly. Slowly, the yin and yang life and death formation in the void began to operate. Next to Wang Lin's great devil doppelganger, the figure of Tsangtian Dao Jian also appeared. Shoichi Dashin and Xianlin Taoist did not move after all. Their eyes fell on the lonely star sea gate in the starry sky on the other side. The star sea gate appeared and disappeared, drifting with the flow of the star sea spiritual chi. Gradually, it seemed to go far away. Slowly, Shoichi Dashin said, "Master of the Celestial Sect, can you part with it?" You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.